Uh-oh. Oops. I broke the chat. Where did it go? Goodness. Restream. What are you doing to me? Oh, well. That'll have to do. All right. Sorry for the late start. I was trying something new with Restream. I was trying to set it up so that way I could, like, pre-alert on YouTube. It says, hey, this event is scheduled for this time, and that way people, subscribe to get notifications ahead of time, and so on. And you're supposed to be able to do that from Restream, and then when you initiate the stream in OBS, it will start that event. It'll all be synchronous, and it didn't work right, and I think I know why, but I didn't figure that out until after I started it, so that's why you might have gotten a notification and the false start and everything. But it's back and it's working. So, welcome to episode 105. Pretty sure I got that right. Yeah, borked. Of the Pathfinders podcast. I am Trio 311, your host and producer of the show, where we are charting the way through all the nebulous information surrounding Squadron 42, Star Citizen, and their development, as well as all things CIG. Let's see. Let's move the mic closer to me. Forgot about that. I'm just a mess today. Let's see. Hi, Prince of Dragon, Iman Stunner, Socially Confused on YouTube. Chat, good to see you guys. John Chavez. Is the mic, John, is the mic, is it the mic better now that I moved it closer? I forgot to move it close. Good to see all you guys. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope you're all having a good weekend. You probably couldn't see it yesterday if you were watching the stream yesterday when we were doing the QV breaker stations, but I'm now wearing the black version of my new dad hat. This is my Father's Day, one of my Father's Day gifts. And I have a forest green one as well, so very pleased with those. But yeah. So before we get into the show, just want to talk about a few things gameplay wise that I've been up to, and I'm hoping you will be interested in, and you'll potentially join me. Socially Confused says that was you point to when your wife gets home. What? Is that? I don't understand what you're saying. I'm not picking up what you're throwing down, bud. Is that what you point to? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. She laughed pretty hard. Because yeah, the kids are alive. And that's the hard part for me is because I am a bit type A, a bit OCD. My TISM likes things neat and orderly, and toddlers are not that at all. And I have two twin 2-year-olds and a 4.5-year-old. So yeah, toddlers and preschoolers. But yeah. So if you've been following either the Twitch or YouTube channels, if you're in my Discord, you know that I founded an org called the Scavengers Union. And I'm hoping I'll be able to finish the write-up tomorrow. But basically, it's a sort of loose collection of people who enjoy um, scavenging, who enjoy, gameplay that isn't rigid, who enjoy looting, who enjoy picking the bones of everything they come across, leaving nothing behind. Um, and it's a little bit of light RP. Whenever I make an event, it's I in the and I you can read about it in the descriptions on YouTube, as well as the VOD on Twitch. But it always has sort of an RP premise as to what's going on, and the RP premises will make a little bit more sense once you understand the backstory to my character. Um, that leads the org, and leads being very generous, because it's more of a I'm playing it more as, in that I'm I lead the organization, but it's more like I'm a mission giver for the organization, and it's almost more like a guild, where the mission giver puts it out to the guild that says, hey, I got word of this job, or I got word of this information. I can't take this job, or this contract on myself. You guys want to come help me out with it? It could be pretty lucrative, it could be pretty interesting, that sort of thing. So there's no rigid rank structure. That there's a rank structure, but it's purely based off of like how long you'll have been a part of the guild, and how much you participate in stuff. Yeah, that's enough medical order showers. Yeah, no joke. Exactly. Good point. Good point. But I'm doing it that way because I've been in several orgs, in my well, I've been in a lot of in my Star Citizen time. I've been in several orgs, and they always ended up being very paramilitary, and I don't want that in my gameplay. I'm just not about that life. People are like, "Oh, you're in the army. You're a Marine." Like, what do you mean? I'm like, that's why I don't want to play my games that way. Like, my experience in the army, I'm a flight paramedic. We're in aviation. I'm on a first name basis with my officers and my warrants. Um, it's super chill. I have very little, like, um, oversight responsibility above me, or on my own. Like, I always joke that it's the best E6 job in the army, because I have no direct reports,
Part of the crew.
and I'm accountable to almost no one.
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Hey,
Part
so
of the
Jonas
crew,
21,
part
thanks so much for the follow.
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
But that's what I wanted for the gameplay, and we've been doing stuff where we go out, and we do some FPS stuff, like we've been doing the QV breaker stations, looking for Satirics in order to enhance our salvaging gigs, because using high grade Satirics to make upgraded abrade mining heads for salvations makes for really fast hull scraping. And we the last week, we that was the what we were doing, is we were doing Adagio contracts, in that they pay to go out, and you pay to go out and salvage a hammerhead, but instead of just scraping the hull, we were also pulling off all the weapons. The other ones that we were doing, because you have to wait for hammerhead contracts to filter in, we were, the other ships were going in and yoinking the components, and then we take everything back, we sell the RMC, and then you break down all the components and all the weapons and so on, and then you sell the materials. And when you do that, it makes you a good chunk of change, and so it's worth it, and it's actually really fun. Like, if you go back and watch the streams, there's, depending on which day it was, there's 4 to 6 of us out there, and we had a little assembly line process going. We had the Idris, which I call the carrion crow. um, with 3 salvations, and a max lift, and a couple people EVAing, or sorry, not a max lift, an Atlas, a couple people EVAing with max lifts, and we were yoinking everything off and scraping everything, and then landing back aboard, and then moving on the next one, moving on the next one, like carrion feeders, like scavengers, like opportunistic predators. That's the sort of theme behind the org. That's actually the name of all the ranks. You go from crow to raven, uh, you know, buzzard, vulture, and I forget what else. Um, and my character is the first crow, because I was the first person, in the guild, the first person to start it out. But it's not like a rigid hierarchy at all. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, if you're not already in the Discord, I encourage you to join the Discord. It's always an open invite. I'd love to have you guys join the sessions. It's been a lot of fun. We did um, tactical strike groups. We managed it with 6 people, and we even killed the Mauler. Despite the issues with repair fuel your arm, we still got it going. Been having a lot of fun with that. Socially confused says, I'm sorry. Can we break down parts on our ships, or does it have to be at a station? So as far as from what I can tell, is you can only disassemble things that won't fit into a fabricator when they're stored in an inventory. So what we were doing is we would, hammerheads, star runners, retaliators, all those things. While the salvations were scraping the holes, one person would usually use the Atlas, and then the other person would EVA with a max lift, and we'd yoink the components and the weapons, eat them over to the Atlas. The Atlas would, stack them all, and then we'd make things organized. Oh, and then like the ships like the MSR, there was even would have cargo. So we were grabbing everything, and again, the whole carrion feeders, you pick the whole carcass clean, as much as you can. The only thing we weren't doing was you know, munching the hull. But eventually, I'd like to, potentially get into that as well. But we're basically, essentially, we were just leaving the bones, is what I'm saying. But then once the Idris was getting full, and like we were running, like we had all the cargo grid space filled up. We were having a hard time parking the 3 salvations. We also had a Argo MPUVT in order to control Rex and move things around and get larger things, and a C8X to use as a shuttle. And so once we got to the point where it's like, okay, it's getting a little bit crowded in here, we went back to Lorville, landed, and then we had an assembly line just loading everything up onto the freight elevator, and it went pretty quickly because we had like 4, 5, 6 people. Yeah, socially confused. Exactly. I I avoid going back to stations if at all possible. I live, right now, and I've been doing it all 4.8, and I was doing it 4.7. I live out of my Idris, and I just basically deploy from that. And if I want to do something else, I take the C8 and I shuttle back to a station or wherever and grab a different ship. But then at the end of the evening, I go get the C8 again, and I go back to the Idris, and that's what I call home. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. At least until we get medical. Oh, speaking of my heart. Speaking of my heart. Um, but yeah, we made, I think it ended up being like 300,000 credits a piece between 6 people over several hours. It's not like there are ways to make more money faster, but it was fun, and it's cool to watch all these essentially bees coming and going from the ship. And then, we, all gather back together, button it up, and go back. And, the conga line, assembly line of moving all the components and the weapons. And we still have stuff we need to sell that's in an inventory, because we learned that if somebody scrapes something using their salvation, and then they're no longer in the party, you can only sell it if they are someone else can only sell it if they're in the party. Um, and and we also had a Golem Ox, right? Or which is the one that carries cargo? Oh gosh, I'm getting confused. Um, when we'd have a full Golem Ox load of RMC, we'd run that to the place that gave us the best sale price for it, and we'd offload that in order to make more room for more components and stuff. It was a neat system. We did a few more times, and but now we're like, okay, well, that was working out well, but we only had one salvation with upgraded abrades. Well, let's get some more upgraded abrades. How do we do that? We have to go get Saturx. Okay, where do we get Saturx? We need to go to the breaker stations, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and that was it was this was driven by a video of someone doing this out of an ironclad with salvations, and I was like, okay, I have an ironclad, but the ironclad's like, I don't know, I still don't trust it. And the the carrion crow, the Idris, is like part of the lore of my character and the organization, which I'll establish on the organization page hopefully tomorrow, but not soon. But it's been a lot of fun. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, I hope you consider joining us. If if not, then I hope you consider watching the content. Yeah, High Prince of Dragon. We still have 28 SCU of RMC that we can only sell if Prince is in a party with my friend Othmion, flying from the IC command bridge soon. Yep. Yeah. Um, so yeah, it's been interesting. It's been fun. We have been Star Citizen a bit here and there, but who hasn't? And we're still making progress, still making money, still having a good time. So check it out. But yeah, so this evening we are covering a few things. The guild's name is called the Scavengers Union. Actually, we're gonna switch screens in just a second. I'll pull it up. And I haven't done the history page, uh, but I've done some of the other stuff. And um, here we go. I'm gonna put the link into the chat, and then we're gonna switch screens, and that way you can see what I'm looking at. All right. So this is the org page. So the background is that's an image from Pyro 2, I think, of one of the salvage yards. And it isn't all just about salvage. It's more just about, scavenging, you know, uh, cargo retrieval, getting into some mercenary work. But in the process of doing so, we loot everything that we can. Um, Doing FPS work and opening every damn box and taking everything that's of value to us, while we do it. Um, Salvage work, maybe even a little bit of mining in order to upgrade some stuff. But that's the impetus for it. So as you can see, I haven't written the history page yet. Um, Manifesto is opportunistic predators are animals that hunt whatever prey is available, accessible, and requires the least amount of energy to capture rather than relying on a single specific food source. They readily switch between active hunting, scavenging, and consuming plants or carrion, depending on what their environment provides. And that's the ethos of the Scavengers Union. And like Socially Confused said, living out of your ship, living in the black. And so I go on to say, this is the base nature of the crows of the Scavengers Union. We took to the black of space in the pursuit of the freedom that life provides. We took the black as brothers and sisters of the Union in order to survive the hard life that we found in the black. But we aren't pirates. No, we have a code. We keep what we kill, but we only prey on other predators. Otherwise, we scavenge the vast resources the black provides and what carrion others foolishly abandon. Whenever possible, we leave nothing behind and let nothing go to waste. That's the manifesto, and then the charter. The Scavengers Union is a loose organization of civilians and citizens who see value in the loot and spoils others would just leave behind. We come together as it suits us and when it suits us to get our hands on prizes that we couldn't necessarily take alone. We share the spoils of our adventures while letting nothing go to waste. Is your alignment chaotic good? Does the hustle and bustle of civilization make you uneasy? Do you chafe under a rigid command structure and strict rules and regs? Is looting everything that isn't nailed down and making use of every part of the kill have a certain appeal? I need to change that to does looting everything. Do you prefer to stay on the right side of the law in UE space? Where there is no law, do you avoid actions that would otherwise send you to Klesher or Quarter Deck? Unless, of course, the UE would look the other way. If this speaks to you, then consider becoming a brother or sister of the Union. Join us, take the black, and become a crow. John Chavez says, seeing the models behind you made me think, if you could pick only one SC ship to get an official Lego model, what is your pick? The Anvil Valkyrie. The Valkyrie is my first and truest love. Well, not my first, because it wasn't, it was made in 2018. Um, but that drop ships are my thing. Ships are my speed. I'm a helicopter guy, and drop ships are kind of like helicopters. But I'm also a former Marine. So what do drop ships do? Deliver Space Marines to the mission. Um, and I've actually oh, you guys have probably seen it. I can't remember their officially licensed brick sets for Star Citizen. Um, Jared has the Corsair on his desk. I can't remember the name of him, but I actually sent him a message. Like, hey, when are you guys doing the Valkyrie? Come on, give me. I do really like their, was it the Hornet that they have? I'm very tempted to get that, but I've got too much plastic shame. I have to build the BB-8. I've got the Mandalorian helmet up here that I just got for Father's Day. I have the Bricklink um, siege encampment down there that goes with my castles that are upstairs in the playroom for the kids. There's also an Eldorado Fortress in there. I have my tubs of Lego for when I was a kid in my garage, mostly pirate stuff that I have to put back together and put on display. But yeah. Um, oh, and this is the logo I had made for the Loot Goblin, which is the starter ship for my Zero to Hero character, who actually ties into the org and establishes, in their lore, establishes a relationship um, with my main. Um, but his cutter is the Loot Goblin, and so I had the same artist who created that logo, as well as the Vomit Comet, which is the name of my Valkyrie. Um, I had him. He's asked. I had them commission a new logo for the Scavengers Union that they started work on, and hopefully I'll have time soon. I'm going to make like an org intro video, um, with music and B-roll and stuff. Um, but it'll be a while. But yeah, so that is yeah, a Reclaimer Lego would be legit. Yeah. The Vomit Comet is ties into the lore. So here we'll go into. I'm not going to read what I have because it's just notes right now that I need to like write out into paragraphs. But my main character is he's a former UE Marine medic, and during a mission, a raid against the Vandal in the Caliban system, um, he was injured and could no longer return to infantry duty as a squad medic, and he the Marines were getting ready to medically discharge, were getting ready to medically discharge me, and I fought the discharge and was able to appeal it, and get the Marines to send me to flight school. And I became a dropship pilot, where I finished out my career in the Marines, turning down promotions and everything in order to stay a pilot and such, and stay, out in the front, close to the frontline Marines, um, and finished out my career and was eventually shot down again in Caliban, um, and was rescued. Um, but my injuries prevented me from continuing my service, and I was finally medically retired, um, and was finally medically retired. Um, but sorry, lost my train of thought. Was finally medically retired, and so what my character did is when I got out, I bought a surplus Valkyrie, and basically served as started a small business as a dropship pilot, bringing people to and from the surface of planets, people and material and vehicles to and from the surface of planets, in locations where pilots generally don't want to go. basically, hostile weather, hostile climates, potentially dangerous locations due to vandal raids and stuff like that, or piracy. I was the guy who would, fly your shuttle where other shuttle pilots, wouldn't go. Um, and eventually I got enough money that, through my time in service, particularly in the Caliban system, which was taken by the Vandal in 2084. uh, my character has a special attachment to it because that's where my family is from. My parents were children when they fled the Caliban system with my grandparents when it was taken. And a lot of my time in the UE Marines was spent fighting the Vandal, doing raids against them in their operations in the Caliban system, where they're scavenging the planet that my family came from there. Um, and going in there not only on ground raids to disrupt their operations and take out high value targets and such, but also flying dropship missions in there, sneaking in and attacking them, and hitting their bases and disrupting their raids against us. um, I got to see how much detritus was left over from these formerly human systems, where humans had been previously inhabited, because like we know that the Vandal, basically like recycle everything into stuff that they use to make their ships and what have you. But that is a long, painstaking process. Like you don't just recycle an entire planet, in a handful of years. And so there's so much left in these formerly human-held systems, as well as all the leftovers from the conflict that is ongoing. Sublimo says, "I'd love a Lego Javelin. That would be really cool, and especially with the way the model looks now in the Squadron 42, in Squadron 42. Back in the hangar module days, the Connie was the quintessential SC ship for me, but it feels like the Javelin now. The Connie is still really cool. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how it gets reworked and updated, because it's lagging, and I'm ready for it to have its time back in the sun and get it where it needs to be, because it's still so popular. It's still such a versatile line of ships. Speaking of the Connie, I have one of these on my shelf right behind me. This is the die-cast model that CIG had made. Need to test it. Super cool. The nacelles rotate and come in and out. These missile pylons coming in and out. The turret squishes down as if the hatches were going to close over it, top and bottom, but it also rotates. It's pretty neat. There's like 2,000 or 2,500 of these made. I think I paid like $250, and people pay thousands for them now on eBay. Last I saw. But yeah, so and because my character lives out of Levski, and living, outside of civilization, not being compatible with civilization, is a hard life. Seeing all these leftovers, all this stuff that went to waste, from, the conflicts, of the systems being taken, as well as, what's left over from human civilization, what everybody just leaves behind, and it just goes to waste. That's why I formed the Scavengers Union. And on one of my expeditions, going out into the Caliban system, I found a derelict Idris, and it was in really rough shape, and it was hidden in all this, other detritus from the conflict and stuff, and that's why no one had found it. And I marked the location, and I made run after run and put all my, time and resources into getting it back into shape, and making it a home, so that way I could live on it and continue on it. And so I was able to bring that back to the Nix system. And now, instead of living out of Levski, I still go there because, there's a bar, and I'm an old veteran Marine.
Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
Hey, thanks so much for the
Part of
follow.
crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the
Steady,
ship.
man.
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
81 SC. Did I say that right? Appreciate it. But now I live out of the Carrying Crow. And so that's one of the other things I want to do is, not only is, my character the sort of head of the Scavengers Union. But he also, not only does he like to collect things, or collect things to sell and reuse, make good use of resources rather than buying things. That's how he survives. But also, he likes to, because he's able to see so much of the history of the verse, in the expeditions, and there's so many, these systems have been around for so long. There's so much that you can find that's old and learn the story of the verse. And so he, he's a bit of an amateur historian, and so like I pick up all the artifacts wherever I go, and such, and and so I'm going to start displaying, putting stuff on display in the Idris, so that way when people join the org, and they go and do, jobs with me, and we use the Carrying Crow, they come aboard and they see, and it looks like a lived-in ship. It's got all this stuff, and it looks, not quite hoarder, but a bunch of, just, behold my stuff, and it doesn't just look like a ship that just got claimed. But yeah, so that's the goal for that. Let's go ahead and we're going to switch screens, and move on to the Roadmap Roundup. And I'm just going to do the transition thing so that way I have a nice clean timestamp for me to find, because I will build in chapters into the VOD for YouTube for people to watch later and find what they're looking for, as well as make it easy for me to download, and then I upload the individual segments as separate videos. All right, let's go ahead and switch back to this one. All right. And so we do have a roadmap roundup from the 17th. So 10 days ago is not this last Wednesday, but the Wednesday before. I've been wanting to cover it. It just came out of annual training at the beginning of, was that, or sorry, the end of last week. And so I didn't have a chance to do the podcast last Saturday. What was I doing last Saturday? I completely forgot. What did I have going on? Oh yeah. Yeah, last Saturday I couldn't do the podcast because I went to um, a Boise soccer club game with my buddy Matt, who is in the org, who I play Star Citizen with. He lives here in Boise, not far from me. We had a really good time. Yeah, so that's why there's no podcast last Saturday. Um, and then the following day, on Sunday, on Father's Day, is when we did or not Vandal Text Brothers, Tactical Strike Groups. So let's go ahead and switch screens, and we will get into the Roadmap Roundup for June 17th, 2026. Almost went to the wrong screen. All right, so Roadmap Roundup. Hello, everyone. Every 2 weeks, we accompany the Roadmap Roundup with a brief explanatory note to give you insight into the decision-making that led to any changes. This is part of an effort to make our communications more transparent, more specific, and more insightful for all of you who helped make Star Citizen and Squadron 42 possible. Just a reminder, the 1.0 column showcases features and content planned for inclusion in or before Star Citizen 1.0. This means you may not have to wait for the 1.0 release to experience them. As features content in the 1.0 column become ready, they will migrate left into a point patch column for release. Be sure to check back every 2 weeks for the latest updates. With that, let's dive into this week's Roadmap Roundup. Alrighty, so release view Alpha 8, Alpha 4.8, the Gatak Railin. We knew that was released, as well as the Tayuli. I still don't know how to say that. I still don't know how to say it. So those obviously were released as part of Alien Week. Pardon me, I got a cough. Yeah, calling it the Tilly is just way easier for sure. I am not an alien ship guy. I mean, they're really good looking ships. It's just not my vibe. I'm an Anvil and Argo guy, and that everybody has their style, what they prefer. That said, the ship teams knocked it out of the park with these. Um, the materials look amazing. The Xion animations are insane. One of the things I always say that I love about Star Citizenship is the level of T. Louis. Cool. That works. Oh yeah, the roadmap has fallen on hard times. Is it Zidozer? I don't know how to say your name. The roadmap has fallen on hard times. It only gives us a glimpse into the very near future. They haven't done hardly any progress tracker updates. They've said they want to update it and change things. Tai Lui, who knows? Um, I wish they would do more. The good thing about the roadmap is it gives us information about the upcoming patch, but then they also post it as a Spectrum post, and there's often lots of clarification in there. So I always like to cover these because it's interesting to see, as they are building out the next patch, what things get added to it, as well as the descriptions are important. And understanding, how CIG describes things is important context for setting expectations and for understanding what a feature is, what it does, what it is, and what it isn't. But yeah, those alien ships, God, and the interiors look great. They fly really interesting, and I don't have them, but from what I have seen across the community, is the release was relatively solid. After what we went through with the Ironclad, thank fucking God. Um, a few issues here and there with like R and R stuff, but compared to the Ironclad, it seems like a much a much improved release in contrast or context. Yeah, the Ironclad release was spicy. That's a gentle way to put it. I still haven't brought it back out. Um, yeah, might have been Hanger Queens as well, and I'm probably just gonna melt them and buy. I melted my Kraken in order to buy both Ironclads, and now I'm like, I don't think so, especially because I have a Liberator. So we'll see. That said, I don't think the introduction of new tech that was involved with the um, with how the Ironclad functions um, was I think that was the biggest issue, and we don't have as much of that in the introduction of the Raylan and the Tai Lui. Um, yeah, it's got that weird interior hangar that you can just run around like that, but that's more of a physics change, in terms of like how um Zdozer says, nice, congrats on it. Congrats on what? What'd I do? I don't know. Um, and so I don't think it had as much to go wrong. I think the R&R things are just that's an issue with R&R that isn't unique to the Tai Lui at all. Zadozer says, I got accepted to get an Odin, and I did try to on all ways except the last one. I ended up getting a Javelin, though. Oh, nice. Good for you. Very cool. Oh, hold on. Wifey. Oh, Tori, you want to come inside? Tori, come here, buddy. You can come in here. Why do you want to lay down on that one? You can lay on your bed or the couch. Toro, come here. Come here, buddy. Come here. Hi. You want to come say hi, Daddy? Here. Here. Here, Toro, come here. Let's see. Can you stand up enough? Probably can't. Here, we're gonna move the camera real quick so you guys can see my dog. No, Toro, come over here. Come over here. Yeah. He's a good boy. He's a good boy. Toro, can you look at the camera? Turn. Can you see up here? Good boy. Whoa. Hey, don't touch that. Okay, go lay down. Go lay down. Hey, stop licking me. I don't want to be all wet. Thank you for the kisses, but no. There we go. That's better. Oh, gotcha. Melton getting the ship you wanted. Yeah, it's I bought the and who knows if I'll end up keeping the Kraken. Toro, go lay down on your bed. Stop. You're so slobbery, dude. Um, I bought the Kraken original concept. I was at CitizenCon in 2018. Um, and so that's how I was able to get it. Um, and it's a really cool ship. I've been enjoying seeing the work on it, because it is, it's they're in gray box now, if I remember correctly, or white, well into white box, peeking to gray box. I forget. The images they showed in the jump point were really great looking. It's going to be a really cool ship, but I have an Idris, and part of what we're going to talk about is what I'm hoping we end up getting instead, that I really, really want. But we'll talk about that later. Um, but yeah, so the alien, it'll be neat to compare the Kraken to the Idris. Yep, yeah. Are you trying to get back out? Toro, you were just trying to get in here. Sorry, guys. Make up your mind, bro. Don't scratch at my door. Right? You can stay in here. You can drop here. You don't have to scratch at the door. You can just push it. If you want to come in. He's a 13-month-old boxer. He's like 75 pounds now. He's a freaking meathead. Wolf on YouTube says, I've been trying to get a Kraken for the last 3 years now, still unsuccessful. Are you trying to get on credit, I assume? Yeah, because the Kraken, the Idris, even the Javelin, like if you're trying to buy it War Bond, it's generally not that difficult. I was trying to get my Idris for 3 years on credit, just melting my Kraken and get the Idris instead. And I, couldn't do it. The credit ones just go stupid fast. But when I finally just broke down and bought it War Bond, like I had no issue getting one. They didn't sell out for ages. If they sold out at all, I don't remember. I don't remember exactly, but there's no issue. But that means a lot of new money. Kraken's in gray box. Yeah, that's what I thought I remembered reading. But yeah. So moving on to Alpha 4.9, item recovery, ship loadout improvements, implementing item recovery, ship loadout improvements, updating ship and item recovery to better support custom loadouts through timed claims, optional expedite fees, freight elevator item claims, and debuting a free recovery option when losses are detected as outside the player's control. So the big thing is the free recovery option when losses are detected outside the player's control. It'll be really interesting to see how that works out, and I would love to have an explanation of how that works and how it detects it. Because I've had to start over with the carry and grow my Idris several times due to losses outside my player's control, where its status was unknown, and I just had to end up claiming it because I couldn't get back to it. And we've all had issues where you store your ship and something happens, and then it shows location unknown, and you just have to end up having to claim it. Wolf says, "Yeah, I'm thinking about just getting a Drake complete pack." Oh yeah, doing that whole thing, and would you use those other ships in the pack to then like CCU to ships that you have that you want to keep and stuff? That's what I did with the 2948 exploration pack with the Carrack. I CC'd the Carrack to. I have a CCU to it or from it to the Odyssey, I think. I don't remember now. But none of the other ships in the pack are what they came with. Yeah, the 2948 was a hell of a deal. Yeah. It's so implementing item recovery, ship loadout improvements, updating ship item and item recovery to better support custom loadouts through timed claims, I'm not sure. I don't quite understand how this differs from what we have right now, because you can ensure a loadout, and you know, and that's what you get back. So I'm not sure how it's different than what we have now. The optional expedite fees, obviously, we can do that, because they're in 4.9. I've already seen images of like there still being a timer um, on things. Freight elevator item claims. So we already have that for ship items, but what else? Like how does this, beyond this part at the end, how does this improve upon what we have um, that's already in the PU? Yeah, Prince, things just get borked, and you don't know why. Why does this keep? Stupid chair. I really need this chair is under warranty, but it's a refurbished chair, but the seal is going and it keeps on like over time it starts to sink back down lower than I want. No, it's the oh gosh. Herman Miller. It's a Herman Miller, but it's a refurb because I ain't paying new market price. um, the Ninetales armor update. Implementing updated armor sets for the Ninetales criminal organization, refreshing the appearance of grunts, elites, and boss NPCs. Oh, that's the other thing is the other thing that people miss is the here we'll just read it from the Spectrum post, because the Spectrum post has the images in it, or some of the images. So here's the image of the new Ninetales. Um, I can't quite tell if there's much of a difference between the helmet on the guy in the middle and the helmet on the guy on the left. But yeah, this stuff is like the whole um, samurai vibe is interesting. It's not for me, but it makes sense with their lore. But it looks super cool the way this is wrapped around the armor. It's very ornate. Um, the first thing I'm farming is those armors. Oh yeah, people are going to be farming this stuff like crazy. Yep. Um, pardon me. So yeah, it's really cool looking, but the fact that they're doing this right now um, makes me wonder what other factions they're going to update, and what they're going to look like following this, to make them more unique. I bet Xenothreat gets an update. Um, they're sort of older legacy factions. Oh yeah, Gib suit lockers, man. The fact that we're getting hints of that in the different builds and stuff for Evo and PTU has gives me hope for like not only this year but like 410 maybe, please. Um, the Bearing CQ-7 bullpup rifle, implementing the Bearing CQ-7 bullpup rifle, a battle rifle purpose-built for close quarters engagements, combining the compact handling of a bullpup design with the firepower needed for tense frontline and boarding combat. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is our first bullpup, isn't it? Do we have any other bullpups in game? Yeah, I don't think I'm aware of one. I'm a bearing guy. I love bearing weapons. Right now, I run a Karna a lot just because as a scavenger, Karnas are everywhere and Karna ammo is everywhere. But I love the P8 SMG, love the P8 AR, I love the P4 AR. The update to that was really great. I love the look of this, and I am going to like this is like when we were doing. Oh man, I was so pissed because we did breaker stations on Friday night and Wednesday night. And on Wednesday night, I had a whole 1SCU crate full tons of loot, including some high grade Satirics. And I had left it in my Valkyrie instead of storing it because my freight elevators in my personal hangar at Levski are borked. Because of course they are. And so we were on, last night we were on our way to a breaker station again. And I was in the Asgard, and I was flying there, and I was going to move the crates around, just because I was going to put them in different positions, so that way I would have my crate over here, and the other people in the squad would have their crates here, here, and here, and so that way everybody would know where their stuff is, and we wouldn't have any confusion, people putting their loot into someone else's box. Everybody keep what you get. Satyrix is a gem, a hand mindable gem that is only available on the QV breaker stations, and that's what you need in order to craft the high. In order to craft the abrade scraper modules, and I don't know what else it gets used in. I think it's in other scraper modules as well as mining heads, but I'm not sure. Yeah, well, and even the only place you can get it is at the breaker stations, and there's only a little bit of it at the breaker stations, and in certain locations of the breaker stations. So you have to know where they are. I need to find a map because need laser swords. But so I've been farming a whole bunch of guns because the other thing I'm going to do on the Carrion Crow, my Idris, for the org is, it has the armory and the shooting range. Well, there's tons of weapon locker or weapon slots in there, and so I'm going to stock a whole bunch of weapons in the armor for people to use, as well as ammo in the personal storage lockers on the pilot. The pilot ready room side of the hangar, as well as hand tools, two-handed and pyro multi-tools, and all the attachments and stuff. So that way, if you forget to bring stuff, we've got you covered. Weapons with all the attachments and tools with the attachments. So that way we can just get together and go do a job. But I'm going to be stockpiling these like crazy. And I'm definitely going to end up getting what I need in order to craft a really good one. Especially if I can get a blueprint for one that, doesn't look basic like this. Not that basic is bad, but I'm not a basic bitch. Yeah. But it's a great looking gun. Ordnance cargo holder, implementing dedicated storage trains for missiles, torpedoes, and bombs placed on cargo grids to improve presentation and handling. So this is a step in the right direction. This is one of those things that's been driving me nuts because these are expensive. I like to loot them and keep them in, I like to loot missiles and keep them in the Carrion Crow for our use, but also, the big ordnance and stuff like that, I want to sell it. But it's nice that these are here, but we need to be able to stack them once into, the size of whatever, however many fit in a 4 SCU, a 8 SCU, a 16 SCU container. And once they reach that limit, then be able to have some sort of, interface that locks them, and then you can move the whole piece together. And so that way you're not having to move them all individually over and over and over and over again. Yeah, the crates aren't physicalized. They just show up once you move the ordnance over a cargo grid, and then that's what they look like. So it's purely visual, as well as being able to see, okay, I can't put anything there because this is the bounding box of this ordnance. But the other thing that's interesting is you look in the background, you can see that here's some that's stacking vertically. So I'm hopeful that the improvements not only make the handling better, so that way you can save space, but I'm hopeful that this is a step in the direction of being able to collectivize these into a single unit that makes it easier to, okay, you make a stack of 12, and then you can move the whole stack. Yeah, torps can't be vertical, but the rest can. Yeah, because the torps are fucking huge. Yeah, no joke. But it even just that, it does look good. Yeah, I like that. And I can't remember because it's been a while since I've read this. Okay, here we go. The other part that's really great about pulling up these Spectrum posts. So that's it for 4.9 so far. This was on the 17th. So, pardon me, I have to cough. All right, so this is on the 17th. So next Wednesday is the 1st of July. And the first Wednesday of the month is when the monthly report comes out. So we should, in theory, have a monthly report on Wednesday as well as another roadmap update. So I'm hoping that we'll get more additions to 4.9 or some clarification on what they're going to be doing with 4.9 after that SCL with Jared Benoit. So next Saturday, I'll do another podcast. We'll look at the roadmap update as well as the monthly report. And then I've got another segment. I don't know if I'm going to do it that night or push it for the following podcast. We'll see, just because I don't want it to run too long. But I've got a another Spectrum Pulse that I want to do regarding it's a sort of continuation of some of the things we're going to talk about later in the evening regarding the travel changes. And it's going to be Star Citizen's travel challenge. And we're going to look at a bunch of the information surrounding that for Star Citizen. But let's look and see what comments Niku or anyone else has left for us. So, that evening on the 17th, Niku said, "Hey everyone, we recently kicked off the first instancing tech preview test with Evocati. So thank you to everyone who was able to participate in that initial test. As usual, we'll progressively roll out 4.9 through PTU waves as soon as we have a more polished build ready for all of you to jump in. Just went to wave 1 a day or two ago. Jump in and test the update's first features. The teams are also working hard on 4.8 with Alpha 4.8.2 new build deployed today to bring a number of fixes and more on the way. It'll be interesting to see. It sounded like they weren't going to do a 4.8.3. We weren't going to get Xeno Threat, like they're going to cut that, but I'm not quite sure. I have a feeling that we might not get a 4.8.3, but instead we'll get, or they might cut the content from 4.8.3 in order to not introduce new instability, but they'll still do a 4.8.3 in that it's a new build in order to implement fixes that can't be implemented via a hotfix. Because that's what a lot of people don't understand is there are fixes that can be deployed via hotfixes, both client and to the client and to the backend. But there are a lot of things that can't be fixed without releasing a new version of a build, without doing a server downtime, which is essentially a new version of the backend or an updated version of the backend to implement things. So these things have to happen in order to make progress. And it's a good thing that they do happen, but that's part of the reason is why we're getting these point patches in between the 4.8, 4.9, 4.10 is to allow them to introduce fixes that they can't introduce via hotfixes. And that goes for both and putting out a new patch also, they don't have to have server downtime, but if in order to certain things that are hot fixed to the back end won't go into effect until you have the new patch on the client side. So that's another aspect of it. Pardon me, got a cough again. All right, only other comment was that they fixed it for adding the Raylan and the Tai Louis. And I don't see anything else. So it's a picture. Yeah, everybody's like, but when are we getting this? Because this is what I want. I want to be able to transport multiples. Come on. Yeah, just making sure. Okay. All right. That's it for that. Okay, cool. That is it. There's a lot of things coming out of their back end. Yeah. Yep. Bless you. Thank you. And we're going to switch screens before we get into the Spectrum Pulse for the evening. And while we're doing that, I'm going to run and refill my cocktail, and I'll be right back. So give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So in just a minute, I'll be right back. We'll switch screens. I'm going to close these. Actually, I'll leave these tabs open. And we're going to get into the Spectrum Pulse for this evening about is Squadron 42 getting delayed? And if so, what's going to happen? Be right back. All right, I'm back. Thank you for being patient. Okay, let's go ahead and switch screens, and we will get into the Spectrum Pulse for this evening about is Squadron 42 getting delayed and what's going to happen. Alrighty. P-Moiled says, better that they delay Squadron until next year than come out with a broken game. This would be a full release, and with all their time and resources, they have no good excuse for a broken, I'm assuming you mean broken game. Yeah. Squadron 42, especially with literally years ago. But CR, I should have pulled it up because that's a good point. But when Cyberpunk launched, CR Chris Roberts made a little comment regarding how regarding that and how that's why it's taken so long is their level of polish what they what they don't want to happen and everything. That was like the people called the excuse, but it's a perfectly valid reason. People have been making fun of Cyberpunk's release for years now. And it's a valid thing. Actually, if you guys don't follow Detox already, going to give Detox a shout out. Super great dude. been following his content for years. I'm always a lurker, but I commented on his video because he got an invite to the playtest thing that we're going to talk about. And his video about it was very balanced and unbiased. Just like he always is. He provides very thoughtful, constructive criticism. I got to meet him at CitizenCon 2053. Was that right? Yeah, I think that's where we met. But really appreciated his take, and that's one of the things that he brought up is that Squadron 42 needs to be polished. Yeah, it's a great game now, but CIG can't go through what the CD Projekt Red did. They don't have the street cred to fall back on with that, especially with that being one of the reasons that they gave for why Squadron's been delayed, is they don't want that to happen. So if that's one of the reasons you delayed it, yeah, day one was super spicy. It was spicy for a while after that. And Squadron can't afford that. If you're going to give that, use that as a reason, and then if you come back and the game launches and there's, and it's, you've been hyping it up all this time, just like Cyberpunk 2027 or 2077 was hyped up, and then it has all those bugs and issues, and in a lot of ways you can tell where they cut things and yanked it back, from what was initially teased. You're gonna get absolutely destroyed, both by your community as well as the outside community, and the gaming media at large. And CIG can't afford that. And to be honest, I'm pretty confident that is why it's taken so long. Not only the main reason is the fact that it's an R&D project. It's an R&D project, and if you have any experience with R&D projects in order to make a product, or to create a process, you'll have an appreciation from a systems design point of view of why this is so difficult. And we're not going to go into that. We're not going to belabor it too much. It's a different discussion. But you gotta be fair in that CIG. If you okay, cool. If you're gonna make offhand remarks at CD Projekt Red, about Cyberpunk 2077, and use that as for why you're, why it's taking, part of the reason it's taking so long, then you better not let that happen to you. Don't be a hypocrite. This is my cough medicine. It's a huckleberry mule, but diluted. We had a huge thunderstorm come in yesterday and all through last night, and so everything got shaken up. And whenever that happens, all the wind and everything makes my throat itchy. Northern Trooper, I'm your Huckleberry. Damn right. So we're gonna start here this evening with obviously we saw at the end of the playthrough of the prologue for Squadron 42, it said 2026 after they did that montage at the end. But we're going to listen to what CR had to say. Oh, here, let's close this bit. Regarding that, because each one of these things that I'm going to pull up, there's quotes and those quotes and the words and the verbiage and how they say things is important. Words mean things in terms of providing accurate context. And there's a few things as we go through this where you're like, oh, okay, maybe I misheard that, or maybe I heard, in my head I wanted, I heard it, but then I translated in my head into something different, and now when I read it again or I hear it again, or I missed that the first time, it might key something up. But let's listen to what Chris has to say.
All right. All right. Well, we did say we were doing it live, risking the demo gods, and they brought their wrath down on us. I think Rich has to be our unluckiest playtester, because you're...
I didn't die, though.
You didn't die, that's true.
I didn't die.
You also got the bug where she doesn't give you the gun at the end.
This let me down, not me.
So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the first gameplay reveal. There's a lot more that goes on in Squadron 42 after that, but that sort of sets up where you came from, and from there you go in to become a pilot and start serving on a smaller ship, the Stanton, which I think we've shown a little bit before. But there's a lot more in the game than we were just showing there, and it also, I think, has been a lot more stable for me when I was playing these last few weeks. But as I said at the start, we have 30 to 40 hours of gameplay, and we're confident we can bring the quality of the game up to the level we've just shown and more without crashes. And both the team and I are confident of giving you this game in 2026. Obviously, you can see it's not going to be tomorrow because I saw a few crashes there. And speaking of the team...
So, he said we are confident, both the team and I are confident of giving you this game in 2026. But before that, he said, where is it? Dang, where'd that go? We're confident we can bring the quality of the game up to the level we've just shown and more without crashes. So at that point, what we just saw was, again, a vertical slice. They showed us the prologue, and what they did is they showed us the prologue after polishing it to the level of quality that they want the game to have essentially upon release, minus the crashes. And so that means that they still have to and probably other parts of the game were already that polished, if not, wherever. But they, when he said this, 2 years prior to 20, essentially, a year, we're a year and 9 months ago, essentially, they still had to bring the bulk of the game up to that level of quality and polish, along as well as stability. So a good amount of work, but also a good amount of time to do it, 2 years. A lot of people are like, oh, well, maybe it'll be early 2026. I'm like, yeah, with that, with him saying, bring the quality of the game up to that level we've just shown. To me, that was like, okay, it's more of a late 2026, and what happens every year at the end of the year, third quarter or fourth quarter of the year, October, it's CitizenCon or whatever event they end up putting on, and so that's what I was anticipating, from the get-go. Then we fast forward, we didn't really hear anything about Squadron 42, hardly anything until we got to the letter from the chairman. I think it came out in January of this year, January 2026. And at the bottom, from Chris, it says, for Squadron 42, our priority remains quality and polish as we move toward beta and release. So this is at the beginning of this year, 6 months ago, they were moving toward beta and release. We're confident in the direction the game is headed and are fully focused on delivering. We know many of you are eager to play, and we're looking forward to putting it in your hands. We don't plan on a long, drawn-out marketing campaign, as we've already done our share of trailers and gameplay previews. When it's time, you and the rest of the gaming world will hear a lot more from us. So, no mention of releasing this year in this part. Just that he says that, in 2026, he just says, remains quality and polish as we move toward beta and release. So just quality and polish, improving the experience, making sure it's polished and stable and all that. But it doesn't say towards beta and release this year. So again, words mean things. But then we get this interview, which was back in February, exactly, essentially like a month and a half after this letter came out or so. This interview was done by Back Pocket. Someone named Josh got to sit down with Chris Roberts to attend. If you haven't seen this, a lot of people didn't catch this. It doesn't even have 65,000 views. I figured that a lot more of the Star Citizen community would have latched onto us in this and had a lot more views. But it's only 10 minutes long, but it's a lot of stuff that we've already known, but there's also a lot of interesting bits of information in here. So as always, the show notes. All of these links for all these tabs up at the top with the timestamps are in the YouTube description. So if you want to watch them later or share them, you can open, it's a Google Doc, you can just open it and copy paste and everything. But we're going to watch this one timestamp, but I highly encourage you to watch this video. It's only 9 minutes long, but there's some other, interesting little tidbits in there that a lot of people have missed. But we're going to watch this one little bit about Squadron. I think I got the timestamp right.
Freelancer online. Much the same way that I think Squadron 42, that we're just in the process of finishing off now, is like the ultimate.
Squadron 42 in February. This was recorded on February 20th. That we're in the process of finishing up now. When do I get that interest? When do I get this one? I want those thrusters. Like, that looks good.
Version of how I would do a wing commander with resources that you wouldn't normally get. And I'm actually really quite looking forward to people playing the game, because there's been a lot of work to make the sort of story and the game basically seamless in how it goes in and out. It's very fluid. Star Citizen has high fidelity, but Squadron takes it to another level, because we know it's much more limited in terms of like set pieces and epic action. Those are absolutely like handcrafted and beautiful. And for me, it's my love letter to all the movies that I like grew up with. I hope people like it like much as I do, and how much I have fun making.
So, February 20th, this was posted on February 27th, but recorded on the 20th. So he says they're in the process of finishing up Squadron now. And then this interview, which was also in February, this was, both of these interviews occurred while they were down in Sydney for, it's one of the, was it the racing? There's a racing event, I think. I can't remember. Oops, lost my... I can't remember the name of the event, but they were down there for. But yeah, they were down there for an event, and Chris gave 2 interviews. A lot. I think Space Tomato covered this one, but I don't think he covered this video. Opium World says, "I love thunderstorms. Property damage can be expensive." Yeah, we got lucky. No property damage for us, but they're we have a big umbrella that extends out over the kids' trampoline. We've got an in-ground trampoline in the backyard. And that got shredded because I forgot to put it down, take it down. Oops. But we took a big walk around the neighborhood with the dog, because he obviously hadn't been out in like 36 hours, hardly, in terms of a walk in like 36 hours. And there was a bunch of tree branches down and sections of fence and stuff. But yeah, it was the videos. We didn't get hit nearly as hard as the Treasure Valley west of us did, but they had like flash flooding with like icebergs made out of snow and hail in Nampa, which was just nuts. People literally were kayaking through their subdivisions. Oops. Press the drop down button on my desk. I'll squish my legs. So this interview, This Week in Video Games, also was while they're down there. As far as I'm aware, was while they're down there in Australia. Down here, Chris says, "We're going to get Squadron out first. The plan is for the end of this year." So again, this is back in February, but there's a certain thing in the industry that we, like everyone else, we have to pay attention. So I can't 100% guarantee it, Robert says, hinting at Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto 6 releasing in November. After that, we'll do the 1.0 push. So there's something to remember, is that when CR was saying this about 2026, releasing in 2026, the year before is when, in 2023, is when GTA 6 was formally announced, even though it leaked, I think it was all the way back as far as like 2021. But it was formally announced in 2023. And at this point, GTA 6, I think at this point, if I remember correctly, and I forgot to save the sources in the notes up here, but at this point, the release date was May of 2025. So not only were they giving themselves, 2 years of time to do the polish and bring the rest of the game up to the level that they just showed us, but they also, were aware of GTA 6, and their targeted release date of May of 2025. So they're like, okay, well, 2026, we've got a wide berth. We'll be way away from GTA 6, even if they delay, 6 months or whatever. Well, then the GTA delayed. I think they delayed twice. Oh gosh, and I'm sorry, I didn't pull this up, or I had it pulled up and I didn't save it in the tabs. But GTA delayed twice, initially to May of 2026, and then again to now the release date of November 19th, 2026. And so they thought they had a safe release window, or a more relatively safe release window, when they put out 2026, because they're like, hey, we've got 2 years to polish this, and then we're not worried about GTA because it'll release in 2025. Maybe not in May, but probably maybe they'll push it back to the fall. Well, who the fuck thought that GTA 6 was going to get delayed a year and a half? Did CIG think that? No. Should they have probably been thinking about that? Yes, but can they plan for that? Not at all. Really not. Yeah, Hellscape Venice. Yeah. So that's a one big thing that's a huge challenge for CIG, is that they had in 20 probably prior to this, planned for a marketing campaign in 2026, and budgeted for a marketing campaign in 2026 that didn't involve competing with the GTA 6 across the media for marketing space, and a release window. So that has definitely complicated things, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of the part of what influenced the decision for making 2025 the year of stability that it was, that led to them making so much fucking money, is it allowed them to bring in so much extra money that they were able to put money back into that fund that came from the investors, that it was earmarked for platform costs and marketing expenses. That's what the money from when the investors bought into CIG, first in 2018, then in 2020, and there's been additional small, very small rounds of investment since then. That's what all that money was earmarked for, is for the, you can go back to the initial announcement, as well as the subsequent one. It says, it's earmarked for platform costs and marketing expenses. They use some of that money, have been using some of that money to cover the expenditures of hosting Star Citizen online right now, because it's so expensive with static server meshing compared to where we were with just 100 player server shards. As well as they use that money for CitizenCon in 2023 and 2024. That's part of why we didn't have one last year, is to not spend that money and be able to build up that nest egg for this upcoming marketing campaign. P. Moiled says, I have Squadron. If it is actually done, then maybe they can work on a later DLC, Defensive Mars or something. There's Squadron 42 is 3 episodes. There was originally 80 or one game meant to be like 100 to 120 hours, and I think it was back in like, God, when was it? It was ages ago when they decided to break it up into 3 episodes. That's why it's 30 to 40 hours for the first one, because each episode's 30 to 40 hours. And the idea is, and part of the reason Squadron has been taken so long is it's an R&D project in order to make this game where it isn't just a single game, but they're building all the tools and the tech in order to, and building in order to make the gameplay features and make the content for the game, so that way they don't have to, they can make it in one game, and then the follow-on episode, they've already done 90% of all, 95% of all the R&D work that needed in order to build the game, and the rest of that's just making content for the second episode and the third episode. And you could do that with essentially a skeleton crew compared to what it took to build the ground layer. The other part that's tricky about this and why it took so long is they had to make it so that way it was cross compatible. All these things work on the same engine. It's the same engine, and it works the same way. And the way that Squadron 42 actually works is almost like a running a simulated server on your local machine that runs the game as a simulation for you as you move throughout the game universe. But they had to make it work that way, so that way the features would eventually be able to be ported into Star Citizen or vice versa, with additional work in order to make them network compatible, PU compatible. That's why they changed, they repivoted back in 2021 in order to move a bunch of the gameplay pillar teams over, as well as the UI teams, over to Squadron 42 in order to make everything for Squadron first and then port it over afterwards. So people always love to just conveniently forget about the fact that so much work has been put into Squadron that is already trickling into Star Citizen and will continue to trickle in more and faster as those teams get caught back up, and fully integrated into PU development, on the push to 1.0. So it's not this whole it's not a zero sum game between the two of them. That they are simpatico. The development of Squadron 42 benefits the development of Star Citizen. We just haven't seen that work yet, and so people don't take it into account because they can't see it. But yeah, so we know that they were planning, essentially tentatively planning around GTA 6. Thought they had plenty of time for not only polished, but to avoid GTA 6. Well, avoiding GTA 6 didn't come to pass. Not only did they get delayed to May, same year, as Squadron 42, but then they got delayed to the same time window that Squadron 42 was probably targeting back in 2024. Fuck, you gotta, whenever these announcements came out, can you imagine how much CIG was absolutely kicking themselves as Rockstar and 2K kicked the can down the road, and they're like, no, our carefully led plans, and so they're probably having to pivot. And what people don't realize, and if you don't pay attention to the financials, we got the audit for CIG that from was the 2024 financials, I think it was, or was it did it show 2025 stuff? I forget. But anyway, CIG took another small investment to the tune of several $1 million. I forget how much, from the original investors a year ago, 2 years ago, as well as a $10 million loan to be paid back at the end of 2027. And this is just conspiracy thinking talk, but I think that was in response to hearing about Rockstar delaying GTA 6 and saying, oh crap, if this steps on our toes, we're going to have to pay an increase in marketing costs. Can we have some more money to do so? And so that money from the additional round investment, or the additional investments, as well as the loan, along with the profits from last year and this year, are helping them build up a big nest egg to pay for their marketing campaign, considering they're, no matter what they do, they are looking at increased marketing costs. Even if they aren't, in the same airwaves, it's just being in the same time period as Rockstar. These companies will charge more, Rockstar and GTA 6. P. Moyle says, could they make it episodic to bring us up to the current timeline a decade later, as in installments? No, it's all one. It was back when it was still one game, they did like all the mocap, they did all the voice acting. They've had to bring back actors in to re-mocap certain scenes and stuff, as well as to redo certain lines and everything, add in additional lines, but it's all over a certain period, essentially 10 years ago. It doesn't catch us up to the current timeline in Star Citizen. I think it's over 2945, 2946 period, whereas we're 2956 now, is when the events of Squadron 42 happened 10 years ago. I have a feeling that when Squadron comes out, we're going to start getting a whole bunch of lore to fill in the status of the Vanduul War from then until now. because they do mention that. If you look at the loading screen for Alpha 4.8.2 right now, it mentions, in the negotiations with the Xi'an for their renewing the Huxa, I don't want to say it, trade agreement with the Xi'an to incorporate a mutual defense. I think it's like a mutual defense clause or mutual aid clause, so that the Xi'an will come to our aid in fighting the Vanduul. Wait till you see the splash screen for 4.8.3. Not going to spoil it, but oh fuck. But yeah, I think we're going to get a whole bunch of information that fills up the Galactopedia, telling us about all sorts of events regarding the Vanduul War, because we've been hearing about all sorts of other stuff going on in the Star Citizen universe in that, over the last 10 years, but nothing about the war against the Vanduul. So moving on to the next source. This Variety article was an interview with Sandy, and I don't remember where. I don't remember if in here it says where the interview occurred or when, but at the bottom, I'll have to reread it. But at the bottom, it says, while no, and this was, let's see, the date. This was in May. So it's just over a month old. This was in May. And actually, sorry, this comes next. Because this was at the beginning of May. Right? So May 7th of 2026, at the end of the Inside Star Citizen 4.8 patch report, let's hear what Jared has to say. I'm going to pull up the transcript.
So it's easy to see that there's a lot going on in 4.8. And like 4.7 before it, this also extends to the weeks after release, with additional defend location missions coming in 4.8.1, some Alien Week festivities in 4.8.2, and if you haven't heard, the return of Xeno Threat in 4.8.3. These guys just really don't care for those pro-alien celebrations. It kind of is. All in all, next week's patch is chock full of content that'll carry us through to 4.9 in July, all led by TSG and DefenseCon. And in that new DefenseCon spirit of sharing things early, let's carry that over and talk about the rest of 2026 for a bit. Now, throughout the remainder of this year, we intend to deliver the newly reworked and fully instanced debut of Siege of Origin, the new Genesis-built planets of the Nyx system, Starware and Starchitect goodness, the enormous multi-staged instance Municipal Works operation, a whole bunch of new ships and vehicles and additional gameplay features and quality of life improvements. There's an Apex $7 car that can literally pop its head out at any moment. And of course, as if anybody could forget, Squadron 42. There's a lot we got going on for the remainder of this year. And for that reason, we've made the decision not to host a CitizenCon event for 2026, either in person, digital, direct, or otherwise. It's a decision born out of how important these two games are to everyone on both sides of these projects. And while we'll certainly miss getting to meet so many of you at once, we do encourage you to check out the Bar Citizen World Tour that's well.
So, what did Jared say? Talking about 2026, and at the end of that, and of course, as if anybody could forget Squadron 42. He didn't say Squadron 42's release. He didn't say the marketing campaign for Squadron 42. All he said, and of course, as if anybody could forget Squadron 42. So, one thing, and this is something that Paul, Astropub, and I go back and forth on, we agree on, and we just constantly like sending little screenshots to each other and stuff, is like weasel words again. CIG is really good about weasel words. And that's why, like on this podcast and in my Discord, I absolutely stress to people, source up or shut up. You have to be able to accurately cite what CIG said verbatim, and with that accurate citation must come appropriate context. How much of it is passed through legal, I wonder. Jared's reading off a script. And I wouldn't be surprised if certain things they did submit, or if they didn't have somebody on retainer for the community team so that way things go, certain things say, hey, if it meets this threshold, it goes through, goes through legal beforehand. Because he didn't say anything about, releasing Squadron 42. He just mentioned Squadron 42 2026. No context, no nothing. And everybody thought that Jared said something to the effect of releasing, Jared's confirming Squadron 42's release 2026. How could he confirm that with what he said? It's a gotcha game. And CIG are masterful at these things for all sorts of things, where the community the community is really bad about playing the telephone game. Content creators are really bad about making it worse because of their footprint and their voice in the community, how they amplify it, of paraphrasing things, not doing this and highlighting exactly what CIG said in order to manage expectations appropriately. Because if you do this, if you actually listen to what they say multiple times, read it, especially, so that way you know exactly what was said, you will lead yourself and your own expectations astray. And if you're doing it to yourself and then you're talking with other people, it's not an additive thing. It snowballs. It's an exponential effect. Context. I just heard 2026, so that must be right. Yeah, exactly. So, but this was at the beginning of May, and that's why a lot of people were thinking, and people for months had been thinking that we're going to get a squadron announcement. I was one of them. We're going to get some sort of squadron announcement during Invictus launch week. But then they didn't have an Invictus launch week, and we're like, okay, well, maybe we'll still do it at the end of DefenseCon, and then nothing. And then they went and said that there would be, I should have pulled that up, but there was something on Spectrum or something that they said that CIG was going to be at, was it Summer Games Fest? And there wasn't any announcement or anything at Summer Games Fest or anything like that. So, I've seen people get upset over like, well, Jared said what? Look what fucking Jared said. Listen to what he said and look at the transcript. That's why I do this. People like will call me a shill for it. And it's like, it's not, or a white knight. And it's like, that's not white knighting for CIG. It's called being objective. Like, I have to explain it to people like, this is my fucking job. This is the way my brain works, in the work week. Well, I'm not working anymore, but I'm a full-time stay-at-home dad. But, until I became full-time stay-at-home a few months ago, like, this is what I did, what I do, is be objective and do research in order to, make clinical recommendations for critical care clinicians. Like, and so there is no subjectivity. It's like, what does it actually say? What is the actual clinical context and stuff? And so I apply that to what CIG does in order to manage my own expectations, in order to make it so that way I have as little bias when I'm reporting these things or saying things to the community. Now hyper focuses on the nuances of his child decisions. Why did he try to eat that specific glue at that time after dinner? Because it tasted good. How do you live your life like a lord? Have you looked around? Lawyers rule the world. Yeah. I can't, what we're doing right here, and this is the product of hours of Googling and researching and going back and listening to things and control Fing the transcript and, searching through Spectrum and such, and saving things as I come across them, all across the community. So many hours get invested in defining all this stuff in order to be able to present it in just this very simplified format. And I can't not do it. I couldn't force my brain to not look at it this way if I wanted to. But yeah, so moving on from this statement to just a few weeks later, what Sandy was saying. Oops, it scrolled up. While no release date has been set for Squadron, other than saying 2026, Sandy Roberts confirms they are imminently closer to launch and that Cloud Imperium is well aware of the demand for more information. Oh, yeah, are they? For more information is only increasing the longer they try to keep things under wraps. At the moment, the heat is being turned up for Squadron. Yeah, no shit. That's a difficult thing to deal with in terms of we are so close to the community. Sandy Roberts said. And with all these events that we do, it's difficult as we get imminently closer to launch. And I say that in game development language. Okay. No context, but what the fuck does that mean? It's very hard to keep it under wraps. So the marketing campaign for Squadron is quite different from Star Citizen. It's going to go for a broader audience. But I'm excited for the community to get on board, and they've been very keen to because they've been with us for so long on Star Citizen, and they really feel like they are part of it, which they are. So for them to sing from the rafters that Squadron is launching, I think is going to be an exciting moment. Okay. Right here. This bit. I'm imminently closer to being a millionaire. I'm not. I feel like I get further and further every day because of how expensive kids are. Yeah, essentially apply the scientific method to what CIG says. Yep. You find all applicable evidence, you evaluate the evidence, and evaluate its weight, its validity, pros and cons, its strengths and limitations, all that stuff, and put it together in order to draw conclusions while also presenting, disclosing, any bias or conflicts of interest. Here we are, minus all the APA, this is and that's, and being, no one. I don't have a peer review process, so I guess I could make that better. It was better when it was me and Nazarus because we essentially would peer review ourselves, but ain't nobody got time for that. Yeah, by imminently I mean in like 1,000 years or so. Yep, every day. But I think that this statement from Sandy, and maybe I'm reading too much into it. I don't know. You guys tell me what you think. But after rereading this, after what's going on recently, I was like, oh, this almost reads prophetic like. This reads like foreshadowing that I didn't pick up on beforehand because certain things that we're about to go over hadn't happened yet. But she said in May, a month ago, I'm excited for the community to get on board, and they're very keen to because they've been with us. So the marketing campaign for Squadron is quite different from Star Citizen. It's going to go for a broader audience, but I'm excited for the community to get on board, and they're very keen to because they've been with us for so long on Star Citizen, and they really feel like they're part of it, which they are. So for them, for them to sing from the rafters that Squadron is launching, I think is going to be an exciting moment. Da 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 da. Here we are. So, a little over a week ago, yeah, JDix, we're going to exploit them. Yes, free advertising. Pardon me. So, a week or so ago, these emails went out to content creators. They went out to people, all throughout the community, but basically people that make content for Star Citizen or organize stuff for Star Citizen. People like that organize Bar Citizen events and other things got invited. Yeah, word of mouth is a absolutely legit strat because word of mouth is also a much more affordable strategy than marketing against Rockstar. Holy shit. But these invites went out, and no, I did not get one. And yes, I have checked my spam. To a lot of content creators, I don't know if anyone is keeping track to see get estimates of how many people got invited. But another video that is pretty well done. 10 Pound 42 did a deep dive on it. I'll tell you what, I'm going to pull that up. I'm going to put the link in chat for you guys because I encourage you to watch that as well. Did a deep dive on this and a number of other things regarding it. But whoops. He talks about the big room where they had all the the CIG employees for CitizenCon Direct. How many people that might hold, as an idea of like how many people might have gotten invited. But basically, a whole bunch of people got invited to a 3-day event at their Manchester studio to play Squadron for their first. Here, let's read the actual words. So, hello, so-and-so. You're invited to join us for an exclusive 3-day event at our Manchester studio on Friday, October 9th through Sunday, October 11th. For those who held the line, it feels only fitting that you are among the first to experience what comes next. Throughout the weekend, you will have the opportunity to spend time with the development team, tour our Manchester studio, and participate in the first hands-on experience with Squadron 42. And so verbiage is important. First hands-on experience with Squadron 42. It doesn't say play test. It doesn't say beta. Just says first hands-on experience. Additional details regarding the weekend's activities will be shared closer to the event. Please note that travel and accommodation are at your own expense, though we do plan to provide information on discounted hotel options nearby. Yeah, how much would it be to fly there with hotel? Oh yeah, it would probably be a couple $1,000 trip. I'd make it happen. I'd go, but I didn't get an invite. And I don't feel snubbed because I only have I have like 800 followers on Twitch, and I haven't even hit 1,000 followers on Twitch, and I'm just over 1,700 subs on YouTube. Like I'm an absolute small fry. Like I totally appreciate you guys being here and everybody who watches and listens to the podcast after the fact and such, but I'm small potatoes. But then there are some people that I've been told that there are people that are as small as me, if not smaller, that have got invited, but I haven't seen it. So not bothered by it at all, but it has created a lot of drama within the community for people who didn't get invited, compared to some people that did. But I also think a lot of people just assume that, oh, it's CIG shills. Hyperance says I would not be able to do it either. I could make it happen. I would make it happen. It's far enough out, but it is what it is. I've been to 2 Citizen Cons. It's fine. But I from a lot of the people that I have seen get invited, it seems like it's relatively balanced because there's a lot of people who have been quite critical of CIG and Star Citizen. But I think it's the people that have done a very good job of providing very valid and constructive criticism, and avoiding emotional bias. Like I mentioned, Detox it provides lots of criticism of CIG and Star Citizen development, but he does it in a way that is very well stated. He's unemotional about it. His criticism is constructed. As an example, people give Space Tomato a ration of shit, call him a shill, and it's like, no, he's critical of the game all the time. But people only hear what they want to hear. So yeah, I think that this down here was absolutely alluding to this event. But what this event to me looks like, and this is just me sort of theory crafting, we're going a little bit off the rails here. But to me, what this looks like is the Expanse beta. The 3-day event when CitizenCon would normally be going on. The Expanse, let's see, this was back in April. They released this trailer for their official beta launch trailer. And they, I thought they had like a closed bit where they showed it off, and then it came out to, they had a closed beta, and then it became an open beta, if I remember correctly. Yeah, seems like a small press junket. I would not be surprised. So far, I haven't heard anyone mention or seen any confirmations of press being invited, but I would be very surprised if there wasn't press that was invited, because I think it would make a lot of sense to have press not only go over Squadron 42, but also interview the people that were invited to the event, the community, to hear their takes and stuff. I think it would be, not only to get press on the game, but get press on the community. But this was the Expanse trailer. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but the Expanse beta launch trailer.
Hello, my name is Leonid Rastarguev, and I am the game design director on The Expanse Osiris Reborn.
And I'm Grigory Ponomaryov, lead game designer on the project.
We have finally reached a very important stage of the project and are ready to present you with the beta build. And first of all, we would like to thank our players who supported the game and helped us to reach this important stage.
So let's take a quick look at a few things to try once you jump into the beta.
During the beta, you will have a chance to play one story mission, Pinkwater Forestation, where you and your companions arrive right after Iris incident. There, at first, you will have some time to explore the station, chat with some NPCs, trade with local vendor Luciana, and even find some precious loot. And after that, you will have to report to your boss for a debrief.
As you level up, you unlock not only new combat abilities, but also new social skills for you and your companion. This unlocks additional skill checks during the mission. That means new dialogue options, new rewards during the exploration, and it can even change the outcome of important events.
Some of those skill points will let you increase squad effectiveness, and others will let you increase firepower and gadget damage, and you will also be able to level up your companions and invest social skill points we mentioned before. At some point, you will encounter Workbench, which is an important part of the progression system.
So, I played the beta. I went through it several times, had a really good time with it. It's not any groundbreaking game, but I love the Expanse, so I enjoyed it. And so, because we have already seen this 1 hour playthrough, or however long it was, playthrough of the prologue. And right after the prologue comes all the part where you move on, into the main story. I would not be surprised. I would be very surprised if they didn't have a equivalent beta like the Expanse did, ready for us to play and test, and that they are going to let these content creators and other members of the community experience it first and report on it before then releasing it live to the rest of the world to play, and use that as a way to soften the announcement that, hey, we're not going to release in 2026 because it's a bad time. Chris talked about it right here. They're talking about it. They are aware of this, but in order to soften that blow, and they can do this event, kind of like how they did for Alcat did for the Expanse Osiris Reborn, in order to get the game in the hands of people who are going to provide a balanced feedback on it, and report on it, and with constructive criticism and praise, as well as probably had the media there, and at that point announce the release date, whenever that is in 2027. But the other thing that is really good about doing it this way is if they do essentially a closed beta and then an open beta for everybody else. Well, if they're doing an open beta and that open beta runs off the launcher, it allows them to include logging within that beta for them to get performance information, crash information, just like having a beta for any other game. to go through those last few months of polish, and so that way it's a much smoother release. When the Expanse did this, this is the announcement that came out. Oi, Boss Mang. From all the comments on our socials, we can tell that since the announcement of the Expanse Osiris Reborn last year, you've been eager to hear and see more about the game. And today we have some really exciting news. A brand new gameplay trailer for the Expanse Osiris Reborn has just premiered at the Xbox Partner Preview, and you can watch it right here. And that's not all. Founders who purchased Miller's Pack or the Collector's Edition, I got the Collector's Edition with the ship, will be able to participate in the upcoming beta. The beta will include a full mission from the beginning of the game, during which you will visit Pinkwater Forest Station, meet some of its many residents, including Zafar, who will later join your crew, confront a powerful enemy, and earn yourself the title of Captain. The Expanse of Osiris Reborn beta will become available on April 22nd, 2026, etc. Since this is the beta and the game is still in the works, performance may vary depending on hardware, and finally, for those who have been asking, the Expanse Osiris Reborn will release in spring 2027. So, announcing the release, not a hard release date, but just a release window, while putting out the beta, which gives them all sorts of performance data. And opportunities to, fix bugs and improve performance and such. Hey, Rodrigo Belushi on YouTube. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you're doing well. Hey, Danger Hobo. How you doing, buddy? I think this is a really great way for CIG to go about things. I think that this is probably kind of what they're going for. I hope that they do this because I would like to play the beta. I had a lot of fun with the beta for the Expanse. I enjoyed talking about it with other people. I'm really looking forward to the game. Some people have said if they do this, well, then the hype will die out. Well, no. Like, the marketing campaign is going to pick up again. This is just to gets the buzz in people's ears, lets people play the beta multiple times and everything like that. It lets CIG get tons of data in order to further improve on it over, however many months until the release, just like Owlcat is doing with this. And allows them to soften the blow of saying, hey, we're not going to release in 2026. We were originally targeting right now, but, be candid about it. That's the best thing that CIG can do right now is be candid with us and say, hey, we don't want to compete in the same space as GTA 6. So we're going to give it some time. We're going to release the beta. We're going to let you guys test it out. And we're going to continue to make improvements and polish, for the next 6 months, and this is our release date or our release window. Cool. Fine. Everything works. Bob's your uncle. Everybody's happy. So that's my take on the information that we have regarding Squadron 42's release, and how that compares to a game that is in a similar, it's in the space genre. People that play the Expanse are going to play Squadron 42 and vice versa. A lot of people, in my community and others were talking about this when it came out and before. I've been following it for years. I love Owlcat. They're a great dev, great studio. So I hope that they do something like this. And I'm either way, I'm really looking forward to hearing about the experiences of those who got invited to Manchester in October. And we just got to wait and see. Hopefully we get some trailers, because this this was from March. And so this was the announcement in March before the beta came out in April with the beta launch trailer. So let's see, is Gamescom 2026 is in August. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a gameplay trailer. Oops. Foreshadowing. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a gameplay trailer like here, leading up to the beta launch trailer when they, I think that that's going to be the beta announcement, because back here in the letter from the chairman, CR says, for Squadron 42, our priority remains quality and polish as we move toward beta and release. I think the beta announcement is going to be what happens in October with release in spring, and they're going to follow a similar path to what Osiris Reborn or what Alcat did with Osiris, or is doing with Osiris Reborn. So yeah, that's all that I have on the Spectrum Pulse for Squadron 42 being delayed, or what we assume is a delay. If it's not delayed, I will be amazed. I'll be blown out of the water. I'll also be disappointed because I think it's a bad idea not to delay at this point. But I would love to hear your thoughts. Hop in my Discord. The invite is always open. Would love to have you be a part of my community. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. But let's go ahead and switch screens, and then we will get into the Scanner Anomaly for this evening. Alrighty, here we're gonna. Should have made this into multiple groups. Yeah, do that real quick. This will just take a second. That's small. Make sure I have that accurately. Whoops. Give me 1 second. Northern Trooper, that's just my face. That's just how I always look. You know that. Should I lick the monitor? But which one would I lick? Would I lick that one, or that one, or that one? Or the tablet that's over there? These schnozberries taste like schnozberries. Why is it not pulling with the transcript? Oh well. All right. Yeah, 3 monitors are the new standard. Okay, let's get back into it. Alrighty, so this evening I wanted to do a little scanner anomaly. So spectrum pulses are when I talk about things that are essentially making waves on spectrum, making waves across the spectrum of the Star Citizen and Squadron 42 community. All that that's sort of the vibe for that. The Scanner Anomaly is again the vibe of exploration of the Pathfinders podcast. Scanner Anomaly is when essentially like I'm going through all the information, looking at things like are of interest to me, and I find something that comes up on scans, and I'm like, huh, what is that? That's interesting. Let's dig a little deeper. And so I decided to then present it to you guys. Of course, you guys all know we got the Anvil Odin concept reveal during Drake Defense Con last month. And if you haven't checked out my I did a podcast segment about what I thought was going to happen, what I was hoping was going to happen in the context for that. And you would have heard my thoughts regarding selling the Odin, which I hate the idea, and I wish they hadn't done it, but what's done is done. No, we can't do anything about it now. But what is good about the Odin is the what it alludes to regarding the development of large and capital ships for Anvil. And if you're not already aware, I'm an Anvil fanboy. Like we talked about earlier, the Valkyrie is my favorite ship. I love the Asgard as well, but the Valkyrie is my first love. I think I have practically every Anvil ship except for maybe the Hawk, just because I don't like the look of it. But I love Anvil as a manufacturer. They speak to my aesthetic that I like. And I do like the look of the Odin. It's not my favorite, but it is very cool, and it's got some really cool Anvil vibes. And who doesn't love great big capital class spaceships? I mean, it's just cool. But what I wanted to talk about, and we're going to come back to the Odin page here in a second, is several years back, actually. Yeah, when did I do this video? Yep. Oh man, January. I launched this video January 1st, 2023. It is the highest performing content I've ever made. I've only done a handful of like sort of short form videos like this, where it's not podcast segment, but it's a actual video. Yeah, Anvil Fanboy Club. But I got almost 19,000 views off of this video, and literally hundreds of comments. Extremely high like to dislike ratio with like thousands of likes. It's a pretty, for me it's a wildly popular video. It absolutely blew up because it says capital ship in it. But like I always do, I took evidence and I presented it and to say, hey, this is why I think that this might be a thing. And so people were still watching Game of Thrones back then. I'm rewatching Game of Thrones with my wife right now. That's why all this Game of Thrones stuff is over here on the side of my YouTube. But let's listen to this a little bit, and then we'll come back to the Anvil stuff or the Odin stuff in a second. But this is why this is kind of important to me. That's RSI. But what about Anvil? At Invictus, a little bit further back. Hold on. Got the wrong timestamp. It's right here. I think it started here. Okay, so part of this is interesting because when the Mezzers fell, the Mezzers had been very closely tied to Aegis as a manufacturer, and Aegis had the bulk of the military contracts. Anvil was starting to make their way in. There's a little bit here and there for RSI, but Aegis had the bulk of the military contracts for spaceships for the UE Navy and Marines. And so when the Mezzers fell, the Aegis kind of lost a lot of their contracts because of their association with the Mezzers. They still remain as a manufacturer. They're still making ships. They still make ships for the UE military, but they've lost a lot of their contracts and a lot of their prestige. And essentially in the lore, for the capital ships of the UE Navy and the UE Marines, they've been largely replaced by RSI since then, because RSI was the only spaceship manufacturer in the UEE that had the production capacity to make these large scale ships. Everybody else made much smaller ships compared to Aegis and RSI, because RSI made the large scale industrial capital ships like the Orion. So they were chosen to make essentially the replacements for the sort of aging Aegis models that had been failing spectacularly in the fight against the Vanduul, which is part of the reason we've been doing much better against the Vanduul in recent memory since the fall of the Measures, not only more effective military leadership and such, but also, better spaceships, using the lessons learned and making new spaceships, through RSI, as well as now Anvil. And so Anvil has also been making their way in there. But as the development of Squadron 42 continues its slow but inevitable march to completion, it is likely that production of ships not limited to Squadron 42 will increase. As we haven't had any new military capital ship concepts since the RSI Polaris in 2016, this leaves us with the question, what is going to be the next great capital ship? For the answer to this question, I think we need to look at Anvil Aerospace. Since the fall of the Messers in 2792, RSI and Anvil have largely supplanted Aegis Dynamics as the primary shipbuilders for the UE Navy and UE Marines. A recent leak from Squadron 42, along with supporting lore, all but confirms that RSI not only produces the... This is the escort carrier that we saw that you can barely see in Squadron 42 in the I Held the Line video, as well as the playthrough. And this is the cruiser. I think it's the Corvus class that we can see pretty prominently. It's the one that got like sheared into 1/3, 2/3 back here. But this is from a leak that came out in I think it came out in 2020. I said it, but either way, it came out in like 2021, 2022. The Bengal and Polaris, but shows that they're also the producers of what appear to be a battlecruiser, as well as what appears to be an escort carrier, potentially an updated version of the Pegasus. Would you like to know more? Watch my video about the specific shot showing these ships and the lore behind them. Link in the description below. Okay, so that's RSI, but what about Anvil? At Invictus Launch Week 2951, we heard background audio telling us that Anvil would be joining the UE Navy on MacArthur to develop the next generation of ship technology. In lore, MacArthur is the home of the UE Navy and has massive shipyards in orbit for production of capital ships like the Bengal and Retribution. Special thanks to Jail for pointing this out and creating this video. Link in the description below. Additionally, from the comm link for release of the Anvil Liberator, we learned that Anvil not only produces the Navy's most ubiquitous fighters, but massive warships and large-scale troop and vehicular transport. And that the Liberator continues that tradition of long-range transport, but on a smaller scale. For reference, the Liberator is 122 meters long. While everyone salivates. Okay. Uh-oh. My kid's fighting my wife. Oh dear. It's 10:30. He decided to wake back up. So, as I just referenced, here's that passage right here. So, from the Navy's most ubiquitous fighters to massive warships and large-scale troop and vehicular transport. Massive warship? Where is the large-scale troop and vehicular transport? And people are like, well, that's what the Liberator is. And I'm like, no, it says right here. Anvil continues its tradition of excellence with the Liberator, an open-air vehicle carrier that applies the tradition of long-range transport to a smaller scale. So it is saying that they have a tradition of large-scale troop and vehicular transport, and that the Liberator is a smaller scale, is that on a smaller scale. But it has the same quantum drive and long-distance capabilities of mil-spec carriers, because it's a large ship. So it has a size 3 quantum drive. It essentially can keep up with larger scale carriers because it's a large ship. It can keep up with essentially capital ships. But so this got me thinking when the Odin came out, well, wait a minute. Now that we're getting, or they've released the concept for one of the massive warships, what about the large scale troop and vehicular transport? Yeah, socially confused, the super liberator, something to that effect. Well, that's what this video was about, is what would a what would a ship in this class, in this category, be like? Not so much what it would look like, because I'm not an artist, but what would its capabilities be? And so I looked at that at the end of the video, and actually let's listen to that. We'll get to it. Into their suite of tools for the community. Go check them out. Link in the description below. The Anvil LPD. References part of the discussion. For this last part of the discussion, I've used assets from the StarJump Fleet Viewer to create some visual references of what I've imagined for the scale of the Anvil LPD. Fleet Viewer is a fantastic tool, and the team at StarJump have put in a lot of great work into their suite of tools for the community. Go check them out. Link in the description below. The Idris is not, however, a good fit for the role of what I'm going to refer to as an LPD, or Landing Platform Dock, which is the smaller type of amphib in use by the US and other navies of the modern world. Its hangar is too small to fit a Valkyrie, the dropship of choice for the UAE military. It also doesn't have a cargo and vehicle bay sufficient for deploying those vehicles on board a dropship in the hangar. Cargo and vehicle hold operations do not mix with hangar and flight deck operations. The two must be separate. This is an essential part of the design of every amphib in use today. For discussion purposes, let's assume that one of the variants that CIG has said they're considering for the Valkyrie in its Q&A is a heavy vehicle variant, like the LAT-C from Star Wars The Clone Wars. Our LPD needs to be able to hold not only 2 Valkyries, but also have a cargo and vehicle bay. Boy, did I predict the Asgard, huh? Let's listen to that one more time. For discussion purposes, let's assume that one of the variants that CIG has said they're considering for the Valkyrie in its Q&A is a heavy vehicle variant, like the LAT-C from Star Wars The Clone Wars. Our LPD needs to be able to hold not only 2 Valkyries, but also have a cargo and vehicle bay big enough for 2 Tumbril Novas or other heavy vehicles like an Anvil Spartan, and sufficient cargo for supplies to support a marine landing. This cargo and vehicle bay would also need lifts up to the hangar capable of moving a Nova. Hold on, kid. Hey, buddy. What's wrong? You're angry at mommy?
Yeah.
Why are you angry at mommy?
Because I couldn't fall asleep.
You could fall asleep?
I couldn't fall asleep because I heard a sound.
Heard a sound? What does it sound like?
I didn't know what the sound was. That's why I couldn't fall asleep.
Do you have your sound machine on?
I couldn't. I have it on the doors open in case monsters get scared out of the lights.
Well, Bunny, if you have the door open, then sounds from outside your room will get in and wake you up. That's why we close your door.
Okay, the door's open so monsters can get scared out of the light.
Well, Bunny, you need to keep your door closed to keep the monsters out. You also need to keep your door closed to keep the noise out, so that way it doesn't wake you up.
I just want to keep the door open with the light on at the hallway. I am so monsters can get scared of the light.
What if we keep the door closed and we keep the light on in the hallway? How about that? Can we do that? But you need to keep your door closed. That way, when mommy and daddy are doing stuff downstairs, we don't wake you up. Okay. But it's important. You need to sleep in your bed. You need to sleep in your room with the door closed. Okay. Because the loud noises from outside the room will wake you up. That's why we close the door and you have your sound machine to help you sleep. Can you go back to sleep now? Because it's way past your bedtime. You're going to be super tired tomorrow. Can I have another hug before you go to bed? Make sure you say sorry to mommy for being angry at her. trying to help you get good sleep, all right? I'm so sorry. Do you give her a hug? All right. I love you, buddy. What? What about with me?
I will give my hug with you.
Okay, you want me to come with you to give mommy a hug? Okay. I'll be right back. Sorry about that, guys. Kids, am I right? Okay, so let's see what I was saying about this proposed Anvil LPD, and then we'll talk more about how the Anvil Odin affects this. Because we know what the hangar size metrics are from CIG, we can extrapolate how large our LPD's hangar would need to be to accommodate 2 Valkyries, using 2 small-size hangars, as well as 2 tiny or extra small hangars to represent the space for heavy vehicle lifts down to the cargo and vehicle bay below the hangar. So, hold on, I gotta pull up the image. I'm sorry, I didn't put this up here on my computer. But, so right now, when I pull the Valkyrie or the Asgard, I get a medium hangar. So let's pull up the, I don't know if they've changed the metrics for the medium hangar, but I had them I had them pulled from the game files from years ago. And so I'm going to pull up the metrics from the medium hangar because that's what I use for this. And this is actually pad size. And so it's hard to know exactly what the hangar dimensions are. So pad size, so the pad size tiny is what we get when you go to pull a ground vehicle out at an outpost. And then there's tiny, extra small, and then small and medium, and then large and extra large. And so right now I get a medium hangar when I pull a Valkyrie or an Asgard. And I had used a small at this point because a Valkyrie will fit on a small pad. And so that's what I was using as the metric. But there's a reason we're going to talk about the medium hangar or medium pad size, and whether that applies to a medium hangar in a minute. when we look at some more information surrounding Odin. So the landing pad size small is 48 wide, 48 long. Well, and seeing it says tall, so maybe that that includes the hangar. I don't know how that works out in terms of like actual hangar sizes. You know, the volume of room within your hangar at a station or at a landing zone. But the medium is x-axis 56 meters, y-axis 88 meters, and a z-axis of 18 meters. So it's only 2 meters taller. It's only 8 meters wider, so not too much wider, but it's 40 meters longer. And so let's look at what that means for the Anvil Odin. Where's that shot? So here is is that an Asgard or a Valkyrie? That's a Valkyrie. So here's a Valkyrie, and you can see the Valkyrie fits well in a on a small pad. It has plenty. It fits on a small pad, but this would be a medium pad in a medium hangar due to how much extra room you have on the sides. But look at how much room you have towards the fore. I think that this is the 88 meter long medium hangar in this image. And not only do I think that because of what we're looking at right here in this image, but if we go to the jump point that just released, this came out just in the nick of time. Let's see. We can go to the design brief for the Anvil Odin Battlecruiser. So one of the things that stuck out to me on the design brief for this is hangars and storage. One medium hangar with a direct access to the interior. Minimum volume 56 by 88 by 32. So it's the compared to what we have on the medium landing pad size. I'm looking at it on my phone, which I think is the hangar size. The z-axis is 18 meters. This calls for 32 meters vertical, but look at how much vertical space we have. We have a lot of extra vertical space, so much extra vertical space. But then the 56 by 88 is otherwise accurate with what I have for this landing pad size medium. Yeah, there needs to be another deck. Essentially, you know, it could be 2 decks worth. But I think that that could work to its advantage, and I'll explain why. But essentially, the metrics are still true. But it's essentially saying that that's how tall a medium hangar is, with boundaries of these metrics to store ships equivalent to a Valkyrie, Paladin, Asgard. It just gives you a crap ton of vertical space for maneuvering into and out of, you know, way more than necessary. And there's another image. We'll scroll down to it where you can get a good idea of the scale of how much excess space there is. So here's a Connie in this hangar. And look at how much vertical space you have in the hangar. Here's that lift back here. Look how much room you have for this Connie. It's excessively big. But if you think about how big a hangar is, if you're landing inside a medium hangar at a station where you're coming in from the side, you know, pulling in straight in, you know, you think about how much vertical clearance you have, you know, and that's a good amount of safe vertical clearance, both to get into and out of, but also to pick up and move around in within the hangar. You know, it's a good, safe vertical clearance. So if we were to take these dimensions and change them, we're going to pull up the calculator and we're going to do this on the screen. So what I was basing this off of, to get the LPD hangar, if we use these same standards, but with the metrics that CIG gave, the Bringer, I'm predicting it right now, the ship isn't going to function properly. Are you talking about the LPD or are you talking about the Odin? So 48 meters long becomes it becomes 88 meters, which again is excessive, but it gives you a lot of extra space. So if we have 88 times 2 plus 32 for the lifts, essentially, you now have a 208 meter long LPD hangar. So essentially, using the metrics for the medium hangar from the Odin to then make a hangar for the LPD to support what I talked about in this video, it grows by almost 80 meters in length. Now, if we're looking at width, it goes from 48 to 58. It essentially makes it 10 meters wider, which is, inconsequential. But it also goes from 16 meters tall to 32 meters tall. So it adds a 16 additional meters in height. So here we're going to bring up the notepad. So if we're now 208 meters long, 58 meters wide, and then 32 meters tall. And I'm making note of this, and I'll show you why here in just a second, because we're going to play through the rest. To represent the space for heavy vehicle lifts down to the cargo and vehicle bay below the hangar, I was able to find the rough dimensions for the Idris's hangar, although these are unconfirmed, so take them with a grain of salt. They do fit, however, given what we know about the layout of the ship and the hangar itself, and what the Idris's actual dimensions are, which we do know for certain. So here's the boundary box of the Idris hangar, the dimensions for it. And obviously an LPD hangar would stick out farther to here, but of course you have all this void space. So if you made this hangar out to here, lengthwise, it would actually fit. But it doesn't actually fit within the other dimensions of the Idris, even though, like, if you extended the Idris out, like the dimensions down here, you've got the railgun space that takes up extra space. So, I mean, if this was actually full-on ship, if it was more how Anvil does things and took up the entire space of the bounding box with the boxy size versus all this dead space within the dimensions, kind of like how, if you look at the Kraken's dimensions, if it was a box, there's a whole bunch of empty space in the void. Bringert says, Odin, it's incredibly massive, and there's already people saying that thing's not going to work properly. What people are saying, what? I don't know how people can say these things, but we just got the concept. We're not going to see this ship for years. It's that kind of stuff is like the inverse of copium, is what it is. It's coping about thinking things going wrong, versus instead of coping or being having hopium about thinking things going right. It's just making up excuses for why things go wrong. And I see that a lot within the community. People take a negative stance towards things and they're like, oh, well, this isn't going to work because of this. And it's like, okay, have you spent any time thinking about how it might work? Well, no, I didn't even need to, because I thought of this and it definitely won't work. And it's like, well, if you spend a little bit of time thinking about how it might work, you can actually come up with some good solutions, and you can actually tie those into things that CIG has said and done before. Like, that's why I do this shit. It isn't hopium. It's I find sources and citations that correspond with, okay, how could CIG make this work? And it applies to features, it applies to content. But like people saying the Odin isn't going to work at this point in the game are filled with such negative copium. I just can't understand it. Like, it's just a ship, and we're not going to see it for ages. And it's people are basing that off of expectations set based off the way the game is now. Like, what on earth makes you think the game now is going to be anything like the game when that ship comes out. That makes no, why would the game be that stagnant? That makes no sense. It's the whole, well, 1.0 isn't going to come out for 5 years. And it's like, yeah, no shit. Okay, well, if 1.0 doesn't come out for 5 years and the Odin doesn't come out for 5 years, why would you think that the Odin isn't going to work if the game is going to be so much different in 5 years than it is now? Well, the game isn't going to be different. Why wouldn't it be? What's CIG going to be doing for 5 years with 1,000+ people? That's the definition of cognitive dissonance, people. The very definition. I don't know. Debate me, folks. Oh, I can absolutely blame those people. It is biased thinking. If you only think about things from a certain angle with a certain point of view, you are thinking with it's myopic. It is biased thinking. It is not like, again, we talked about this earlier, like I applied a fairly academic process to this, which is why sometimes I'm very critical of CIG, because I come at it from either, sometimes it's purely subjective and like, no, I just don't like that. And other times it's like, no, I'm looking at this objectively and here's the evidence I'm looking at, and this is objectively bad. But for people to say the Odin isn't going to work when we just got the concept and we're playing in a game that, is so limited as it is right now, it's like CIG isn't designing the Odin for the game we have now. They're designing it for the game that is going to be around when the ship releases. And you have to be able to have a little bit of forethought and look at the development, look at what CIG is working towards in order to put that into frame of reference and be like, oh yeah, academic grunts. I didn't end up in the infantry because I didn't do, the Marine recruiter wouldn't talk to me because of my ASVAB scores. He's like, no, fuck you. You're just wasting my time. Let's just put it that way. But like I this is the way I do things because I've gone to college and I use my education for work, and I can't help but think this way because this is how I approach things in the real life. And it just always floors me that so few people in the Star Citizen community don't do the same. It's like, what do you do for, like, God dang, am I the only one in this line of work? Yeah, no worries. No, I'm not shitting on you. Bringerd. Is it Bringerd? And you're going to hear, you're new to the game and you're going to hear a lot of that, but you have to take it with a grain of salt and you have to listen to what people say and how they make that argument. And then look at the flip side. Okay, if they're saying this is why it won't work, okay, well, what are they saying about why, how it would work? Nothing? Okay, well, then their argument isn't valid. Like, that's how you make an academic argument. Like, you look at the strengths and limitations, the pros and cons. You look at the evidence that supports the argument. You look at the evidence against it, and you measure the weight of it, and how valid it is. Like, that's how I do this stuff. I'm not worried about the Odin. I'm never going to own an Odin. I'm never no interest in buying one or even acquiring one in game. It's too much of a behemoth, but people are approaching it from, after getting out of a game session where, they played with a Polaris or something like that and they dealt with a whole bunch of bugs and, it was hard to get a group together and like, this will never work. And it's like, well, yeah, you're looking at it from the lens of Star Citizen in 2026, not the lens of Star Citizen in 2031, Ace Noble says, so Anvil has a vehicle transport and a troop transport. Do they need a competitor to the Star Lancer TAC? This is not a Star Lancer TAC competitor. The Star Lancer TAC is a tiny ship. The Star Lancer TAC is, in this case, it's almost kind of gameplay equivalent to the Star Lancer isn't even an equivalent to the Liberator, and the Liberator is kind of the in-game equivalent to the new Marine landing ship that the U.S. Marines are introducing. What I'm talking is more along the lines of what the U.S. Navy calls and other navies call an LPD, as well as the larger version, which people call helicopter carriers, but the U.S. Navy calls an LHD or an LHA depending on the model. But in terms of role, what they do, obviously it's not a 1-for-1 in terms of size and what they carry, because everything is plussed up in size in game. But it essentially performs the same sort of mission. Because like with the TAC has drop seats. You don't live in a drop seat. When you have a LPD or an LHD, you live on that ship. You deploy from that ship. You are embarked upon that ship for months at a time, without returning to base. The TAC is just to transport you from your base to the target, in a short period of time, not for you to go on, a long period deployment. That's what an LPD and an LHD do. Oh yeah, no worries, Ace. You're good. But even the Liberator has drop seats because it's meant to just, take people from one base. This is meant to take people from one base to another, and the drop seats are just there in order to mitigate G forces as you're entering atmosphere and landing, because people don't understand that with the new flight model and the way ships are going to work and the way that gravity is eventually intended to work, that your gravity is going to have much more of effect on ships and people in ships as you come into atmosphere and you land. And so bringing in people down to land, especially in a potentially combat landing, you're going to want people in their jump seats, drop seats, whatever you want to call it. But so let's continue on watching this part, so that way we can get an idea of how much larger, if we use what we are hearing from the Odin as basis for talking about the large-scale troop and vehicular transport that are to come, essentially. This tells us that while our LPD would need to be wider than an Idris by at least 23 meters, it would not need to be longer, given that the Idris's hangar does not come close to running the length of the ship itself. Our LPD also would likely only need to be slightly taller than an Idris, about 5 meters or so, to accommodate the hangar and the cargo and vehicle bay below it, due to the size of the Idris's hangar and its railgun in comparison. For additional reference, we can look at the Idris versus the Kraken. The Kraken is narrower than the Idris, but it is also taller and longer than the Idris.
These are old Kraken metrics, by the way.
Would be wider than the Kraken and an Idris.
Hasn't changed a lot, though.
It would likely be in the same length category as both, and between the two in height. For our last comparison, we can compare the Idris to the Javelin. The Javelin is the largest player-ownable ship, a destroyer sold only to the public after decommissioning and demilitarization. Because our LPD is roughly the same length and height as the Idris, it is still substantially smaller than the Javelin in those dimensions, and after adding in the extra 23 meters for the hangar, our LPD is still about 150 meters wide, nearly 50 meters less wide than the Javelin. In conclusion, in order for Anvil to make a large-scale troop and vehicular transport, or LPD, capable of carrying 2 Valkyries, 2 Tumbril Novas, as well as a reinforced platoon of Marines and all their supplies, we would likely have a ship less than 250 meters long, greater than or equal to 150 meters wide, and plus or minus 55 meters tall. For reference, the extra-large or capital-class hangar dimensions are 272 meters long, 160 meters wide, and 64 meters tall. So this ship, the LPD, would be about as long as an Idris, not quite as tall as a Kraken, and 50 meters less wide than a Javelin, and still be able to fit in a capital class hangar with room to spare if need be. A ship like So the hangar, if we use the Odin metrics that they use for a medium hangar instead of a small hangar, because the Valkyrie will technically fit in the small hangar, but it's a tight fit. So if we go by using a medium 2 metric hangar, the hangar goes from due to the size of the. So the hangar goes from 130 to 200 and we'll just call it 210. So it grows by 80 meters. But then the hangar only goes from 48 to 58, so only gets 10 meters wider. And so, but then it gets 16 meters taller. So we'll add, so 80 meters taller, 10 meters wider, 16 meters taller. So, and this is just absolutely super rough table napkin math about how, if we use the metrics from a medium hangar to do what I sort of sketched up in my head regarding this LPD. So instead of being 250 meters long, we need to add 80 meters to it. So that becomes less than 330 meters long. Wide, it's about less than or equal to 160 meters now. So we'll just say less than 330, because maybe they end up changing the metrics. Maybe they don't go full, because that's the big issue in this image is look at all that excess space. And in my idea, you don't need all this excess space, but it just depends on if they use a 2-metric pad. Now, do you want the vertical space? I think the vertical space is more important in order for being able to pick up and lift off and maneuver within the hangar and everything safely. But you don't need this much space because in my idea, what I had was behind each pad was another smaller pad that was also a lift in order to bring vehicles and cargo up from the cargo vehicle bay below the hangar. And that's why, it was not as big. Yeah, I'm learning Northern Trooper. I'm learning about Warhammer 40K, and you want to talk about wasted space? Shit, yeah. Yeah, when you think about the dimensions of their ships, it's like, holy crap, Troop and vehicular transport. And then we'll call, we need to do plus or minus... Let's call it 70 meters tall. And this is basically, so this is adding in the dimensions of a hangar that is essentially, this is essentially taking the dimensions of the hangar and putting it inside an Idris and then stretching the Idris out around it, because there's excess, obviously excess size on space on either side of the Idris as well as on top and the bottom. And that's why I was using the Anvil design, because the Anvil, like the Valkyrie, they do a good job of using up the space within the bounding boxes. So like if we look back up here at the metrics, so the medium hangar has a boundary box that is 12 meters wider than the hangar, 12 meters taller than the hangar, and 12 meters or 12 meters longer and 12 meters taller. So that's essentially what that comes up for, in order to give space around the hangar for geometry because of where the hangar is on the ship. So here, let's look at, essentially the wall space around the hangar, and that's essentially what the Idris has as well around the hangar here, in order to get the final metrics. And again, super rough table napkin math. But that makes it. So let's pull up that extra large hangar dimension. And this is the extra large pad. It says extra large pad dimension, but the extra large or capital is a X of 72. Oh wait, no. Oops, wrong one. Looking at the wrong one. So an X of 160. So that's we're with it. We're just barely scraping the side of that, but that's the pad size, not the actual door size. A Y of 272, which we are now 60 meters too long, and a Z of 64, and so now we're 60 meters too tall. So if Anvil wanted to do an LPD using the same sort of characteristics that I said, as well as using a design brief utilizing a medium hangar, it would be too big for a capital class hangar. Now, so that doesn't mean that CIG couldn't build an LPD with a medium hangar in it that could fit within, but it means that they'd have to be very judicious about the use of space in the vertical and length axes in order to still make it work. Because remember, I utilize some of this space as if we were filling it out like an Anvil ship possibly could, like the Liberator does, like a Valkyrie does. So that's something to consider. Now, the other thing to think about, and it doesn't have to be a ship that can land in a hangar. That's not necessarily important, although it would be nice. It doesn't have to be, because the idea of an LPD and an LHD is that they don't go to shore. They can go to a dock, but essentially you could dock at a station, and take on stuff. But in terms of bringing aboard vehicles, they are ferried aboard, large vehicles and everything. They are ferried aboard using landing craft. So you don't necessarily have to be able to stay in an extra large or capital class hangar, because you don't need to land on a planet, because you can take your you can dock at a station to bring on supplies and bring cargo over. But if you want to bring over vehicles, you can just bring them up via your Valkyrie and or your Asgard from the surface and load them aboard the way nature intended, just like how we do it in real life. And so that really isn't a huge limitation for CIG in order to create an LPD. And obviously an LHD being much bigger definitely wouldn't be hangar bound, but an LHD would probably end up being, similar metrics to the Odin in terms of much larger hangar, taking up a lot more of the essentially bounding box of the ship. If this whole gray thing is the bounding box of the ship, well, and this is one medium hangar, you could fit several more medium hangars, as well as a whole lot more space for vehicles and cargo below, and maybe even a combat air patrol hangar above, and have it look very, Anvil, super Liberator size, and be within the bounding box of the dimensions of an Odin. So what I also wanted to talk about, though, is so we talked about what potentially the size of this sort of ship could be. Yeah, tall enough to land a Carrack. It's an excessive amount of space, but I understand why CIG would want to use a 2 hangar metric. Doesn't mean they have to, but considering they've been, since they reconcepted the Polaris, everything has been 2 hangar standard metrics. The Odyssey has a 2 as a small hangar size, a standard small hangar size metric. I don't know about the Starlancer, honestly, because I don't think they ever said if that was a 2 metric tiny or not. But ostensibly, this is a two metric medium hangar. And so that's what I'm going to go roll with, because that gives you sort of like your top end of what size would be. But the other things that we know about is with RSI, they built they sort of did it backwards, but they built the Polaris, and while the way things happen with the ship development teams, there's the people in the disciplines that work on a ship when it's in concept and white box. And then there's the people in the people, there's some overlap, that work on it when it's in gray box. And then there's different people that work on it when it's in final art. And so these people hand off a ship over these people when it goes into final art and everything, which is a lot of the time at the end, gray box and final art. And then these people who are the concept white box people will pick up another ship, and they'll be working on the second ship while the second team is working on the first ship. It overlaps, it rotates like that. Danger Hobo, can I stay in the truck? No, get in this tiny box. Force protection. Yeah. Doesn't Crusader have the Jupiter? Yes, Crusader does have the Jupiter. The Jupiter, it was always meant as like a jumbo ferry for moving their shuttles around, though. The military uses it for moving their vehicles around, but it isn't something that like deploys with the fleet. It's one thing to transport vehicles from one UE base to another. It's another thing to deploy vehicles aboard a ship that is escorted by combat ships that would then go to the Vandal front, if not go out into Vandal space, in order to conduct offensive operations, which is what an LPD or an LHD do. Now, they're not in the line of battle, but they do provide force protection in the form of aircraft, or in this term, spacecraft, as well as ground forces and the means to deploy those ground forces. And if you want to learn more about this sort of stuff, go watch this video. And of course, this is in the show notes, but I'm going to put the link in the chat right now if you want to save it for later. And if you want to talk more about it, I could go on about that shit forever and ever and ever. But so on that, and same sort of thing happened with the Polaris. When the Polaris was in production, when the people who were done with the white box and gray box, part of the gray box aspect of it, handed it off to the artists that did all the, the surface stuff and the final art stuff. They are the ones that then picked up the concept and white box work of the Perseus. And then when they handed off the Perseus to the people, that second team, to do all the final art stuff, etc., for the Perseus, they were probably initially intended to go pick up work on the Galaxy, but that got delayed and has only just recently started to go back into production. Well, the same sort of pipeline will most likely apply to the Odin and the Liberator. And so I think that they have announced the Odin as the sort of end of the line of the production of Anvil large and capital ships to go over the next several years. And what just recently went back into production. So the white box, the Galaxy again, is through white box. And where'd it go? With resources freed up following DefenseCon, pre-production picked up for the Anvil Liberator, with the start of white box scheduled for the end of the month. As part of this, an update was made to the interior to allow for quicker entry and exit to the landing pads. So when the Liberator, when the team that are doing pre-production, which is concept, and white box work on it are done, they will pick up pre-production and concept work, or pre-production and white box work on the next Anvil ship that has already probably been concepted, but because we are not seeing these concepts anymore, they're straight to flyable. This next ship, probably a large, the one to follow the Liberator, a larger capital ship, will go into, will have its white box and gray box phases, essentially going on while the Liberator is in final art, 6 to 9 months from now. I guarantee you the Liberator is looking at a DefenseCon Invictus launch week release next, this time, essentially, 11 months from now, and so on and so forth, depending on how big this ship is. But this will allow them to break out to make more pieces of Anvil kit, to break out pieces of Anvil kit from the Liberator in order to inform the development of the next Anvil ship and the next one and the next one leading on to the Odin. And I think that pipeline to Odin starts with Anvil Liberator, ends with Odin, and includes other massive warship, probably one more massive warship, and a large-scale troop and vehicular transport. If not one, maybe two. But I think the Odin is probably 5 years away. I think the Odin is probably a 1.0 ship, and 1.0 is probably 5 years away. But I think in that 5 years' time, we're probably looking at, the Liberator plus two additional, potentially three additional Anvil ships. Probably a large, my guess would be some sort of Anvil frigate competitor, as well as a something in the same similar dimensions in terms of a Anvil LPD. The bigger brother of the Liberator, as well as another Anvil large ship in the Perseus to Hammerhead weight range. But I also wanted to, so if you don't follow, I highlighted Star Jump these are Star Jump assets. I highlighted Star Jump in my original video. Love Grim. Grim's a great guy. We talk fairly regularly. But he's brought back in the Skunk Works. If you haven't watched the previous Skunk Works, they did a really cool Argo capital ship concept that was really neat. But he did part 1 about 2 weeks ago, just did part 2 last week, I think. Part 3 is coming up, where he's going through the process of, just in time for your retirement. And I'm hoping mine too. But it's been really interesting to watch when Grim does these. For me, it is like spaceship happy trees. It is spaceship ASMR to listen to him talk about his process for doing these things and how he puts it out. But I wanted to highlight what Grim said in this segment of part 1.
With one of those, we may divert and do something wildly different. So we'll just have to see. Now, let's talk about the actual assignment here. All right. Because many of you may be asking, well, we have an Anvil carrier. We have the Liberator. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Our assignment is to create an Anvil carrier that has the ability to carry 2 medium size 4 ships. Okay. What is a medium size 4 ship? Something like a Paladin. That's a
Deja yeah. I was picking up what you were throwing down when you said that the other day. Yeah, because he does the exact same thing. Grim, I love you. We're not throwing shade.
medium size 4 ship. Okay. It needs to have the ability to carry 2 to 4 extra small size 2 ships. Okay. If any of you are familiar with the Drake Kraken, you will start to see the similarities here. Okay. The Kraken is supposed to carry 2 medium ships and 4 extra small ships with another 2 extra small in the hangars. But for this particular project, we're focusing on 2 medium ships and 2 to 4 extra small ships. If we're able to carry more, great. If we can't, we can't. It's going to be positioned as a competitor to the Kraken and the Idris. So we're not talking Liberator size here. We're talking bigger, capital size. Okay. The Liberator's a large ship. We're talking capital size. Okay. And then ultimately, part of this assignment is going to be figuring out a really cool name for this thing. As you all know, if you've been involved in any of the past projects, you'll know we have a lot of fun when we get to that stage. So, okay.
So that's why I put, but what about Valhalla in the title of this show? Because he talks about Valhalla as a name. Somebody suggests it. And I think that's a great idea because of the Valkyrie, bringing people to words to Valhalla and such. But the assignment is very much the assignment of what I showed here. And there's a reason for that. And I want this ship to be, as close to Kraken category in order to be a Kraken competitor. Less ships, but being able to have more, have more internal hangar space versus external and such. A good amount of cargo and everything, but more military focus versus um, industry focused. And not to be a frontline competitor. Because like Grimm talks about in his videos, it would have mostly a defensive armament versus offensive. You're not bringing this into the line of battle. If you do that, you're wrong. But the reason, I say 2 Valkyries or a Valkyrie and an Asgard, along with, smaller ships, smaller vehicles and such, is because let's see, pretty sure I had that image. Hold on. Aha. Here we are. And vehicle hold operations do. It also doesn't have a cargo and vehicle bay sufficient for deploying those vehicles on board a dropship in the hangar. Cargo and vehicle hold operations. So, this is a sort of white box model of a U.S. San Antonio class LPD. So flight deck right up here can hold multiple Ospreys, but then you have 2 landing craft, 2 LCACs right here. The previous class of LPDs that the Denver or the San Antonio is replacing, you couldn't fit 2 LCACs. You could fit 2 of the LCUs, landing craft utilities, in there. You can fit 1 LCAC or 2 LCUs. But you can see how you've got where the LCACs, your landing craft are stored, and then all your vehicles and supplies are stored elsewhere, and then are loaded onto the LCAC, and then the landing craft, and then they depart. Or the vehicles or the supplies and such go up onto these aircraft. And so that's, it's why, obviously you wouldn't have, aircraft separated from, ships and everything, but essentially the cargo and vehicle spaces are separate from where your landing craft, your landing ships are, in order to not impede the flow of of those ships passing through. Yeah, too old for that ship. Yep, yeah, same. And then here's another image of the next one with hangar and flight deck operations. The 2. This is this is closer to an LHD. I forget what the Aussie is actually called theirs, but this is the Aussie equivalent of a LHD that is actually smaller than the American versions. But you can see they've got 4 of what sort of like our LCUs inside their what's called a well deck, along with some rigid hull boats. But you could also fit, because the LCACs are wider, you could fit 2 LCACs in here, but with room to spare. But you can fit full-on takes. This is more of what an LHD, the larger, sort of closer to Odin size one would be like, with a lot more interior space. And part of the reason I brought this up is because of some things that came out of that were data mined from the 4.9 Evocati and PTU. And Grimm talks about this, in episode 2, I think it was, where he thinks that carriers are not so much for transporting vehicles long distances, but mostly just to have a base to operate from. And I think that I don't agree. I think that the being able to transport vehicles and supplies long distances is still absolutely valid. Particularly because as Star Citizen gets bigger, the systems are going to get bigger. So this is a spreadsheet of all the quantum fuel changes that have been found in 4.9. And this is post ship-to-ship refueling improvements that came with 4.8, with NPCs being able to refuel us. And I'm sorry, this is in white mode. It's just going back and forth between white and dark is a pain. But as you can see, so over here is quantum drive size, old quantum tank size in SCU, new quantum tank size in SCU, and the difference as a percentage. And then here is the old stock consumption in here. I'm going to share this spreadsheet with you guys so you can... Oh. Why isn't it? Copy link. There we go. And obviously this is going to be subject to change, but I think this is more in line with the direction that they want to go. You know, I obviously there's going to get some balance. Some of these things, like the changes, don't even make sense. Like the base freelancer, I think, or is one of the ones where it has better range than the DUR, which makes no sense because the DUR is supposed to be longer range. So I think some things are like typos, but I think this is breaking up ships into archetypes like they did with the flight model changes, where they will then provide more differentiation within different specializations within the archetypes, you know, like for fighters, small, medium, and large, and heavy, and then interceptors versus, you know, dogfighters, etc. But you can see in the amount of quantum fuel that ships have, it is a lot of red. And the changes that are in green, ships that went up, there's not very many of them, and a lot of them are very small changes. But on this other side, and again, this is with the stock drive, so these values will change if you change the value of the drive from a non-stock drive, you know, say to a military or a higher grade military drive, who knows, yeah, depending on the things, or if you craft something. But a lot of ships got not only got a decrease in the Avenger series, got a decrease in how much quantum fuel they carry, but also got an increase in their consumption with a stock drive. And so now on this far end, you have their new distance that they can travel in gigameters. And I don't know how that applies to AU, but I just know that, you know, how we make jumps in gigameters is in Star Citizen when you're using quantum, you know, the larger distances are in gigameters. So ultimately, this column over here is the most important one, and you see massive drops in a lot of ships, and it is predominantly across smaller ships in terms of how far they can go. And some of the bigger ships also got big nerfs, but it's not as much of a deal because they were overpowered to begin with. Like the Idris right here. Before, the stock distance I could go in my Idris was 1,600 gigameters. You could just cross, if you applied that to the 1.0 system, you could run the whole ring of the 1.0 systems multiple times over without having to refuel easily. You still can, just not as many times. But it went from being able to go 1,600 gigameters to 528, which is still huge. 10 times the distance that an Avenger Titan can go without refueling with a stock drive. And obviously, again, these are subject to change. But whereas, like, you can't even cross Stanton once in an Avenger, you can cross it 10 times in an Idris. Socially Confused says, I thought tanks were increased for pyro and that the increases were temp. Yes, exactly. Yes, things were increased for pyro temporarily in order to allow people to be able to access the content, as well as there are less stations in pyro. There are more stations, but only 11 of them are inhabited versus how many stations we have in Stanton, which is like 20 some odd. There's like more than double the amount of stations that you can use to get fuel at in Stanton than you can in pyro. So that was part of it. And then we're probably going to see a similar environment in Nyx, if not worse depending on how big it is. But again, this is in line with the development of Star Citizen because of how dispersed the content is because of the planets that we have and the amount of POI that are on the planets. And so that's why a lot of the missions take us all over the star systems right now and all over the planetary systems because of how much content there is available. Well, what's going to change about that? That's coming out this year that we just heard Jared talking about in here. Genesis planets with Starchitect. They're also working towards dynamic server meshing. Genesis planets with Starchitect means fuck tons of locations, fuck tons of content, which means we don't need to be jumping all over the star system anymore with little ships in order to be able to access content. Danger Hobo says specifically the International Astronomical Union defines the astronomical unit as exactly 159,597,870.7 kilometers, because 1 gigameter is equal to 1 million kilometers. The conversion is 1 AU is 100 essentially 150,000 gigameters. Okay, cool. Good to know. Yeah, I would have guessed that 1,000 gigameters equals 1 AU. And that's the hard thing, is we don't know where the actual bounding box for the star system of Stanton is. We just know that it's supposed to be 5 AU. But we don't know where they draw the line at. Agent 1213, I do have an org that I actually just started. I have a pretty active Discord of people that I play with on the regular, but I've also formed an org that is very small at this point of people that are active in the Damn it, Danger Hobo, stop reminding me to do that. You're making me look bad. I will put that in there. Here, I'll make a Discord invite. The org is small but growing, and no, you're good. I keep Northern Trooper keeps getting me about that too, and I keep forgetting to do it. I promise I will at some point. I just have to be reminded when I'm not in the middle of a podcast or a stream. Here, I'll make an or a Discord invite real quick. Ooh, sorry, just seeing some things that are posted in my Discord. Edit invite link. And never expire, no limit on uses, generate link, copy, and then paste. See if that works. And then if you join the Discord, there's a channel where you can, the welcome channel to the org, and from there you can click the little icon to accept the role, and there's a link to join, link to the org as well if you're interested in joining. But I can also tell you more about that later. And if you watch the VOD on YouTube or Twitch of this podcast, in the beginning of the podcast, I talked a lot about the org and showed off the org page, and gonna be doing some more of that tomorrow and this next week. We've been doing a lot of little events together, and it's been a lot of fun. So these changes, along with being in response to and in conjunction with being able to get refueled by NPCs, goes along with us getting dynamic, work on dynamic server meshing, work on Genesis planets with Starchitect with a greater concentration of content within a planetary system, much greater, which has been the plan since they were developing. Oh gosh, I forgot the tool that they used for making locations when they were developing Pyro, which they still use, but they use that more for making hero locations now. And so we won't need to be making large jumps across the system anymore, particularly in smaller ships for the content that they're doing. But B, it allows them to bring in this concept of being able to use larger ships to get around when you do need to move across system, using larger ships to ferry equipment around, as well as generating content for that. One of the 1.0 professions is hauling vehicles, and so we have some vehicles that do that. We're going to need more. But the fact that the Liberator is going into production, the Kraken is in production, and we know that the Anvil Liberator comlink talks about more ships from Anvil that do this sort of work. I think that is going to be riding the tailcoat of these quantum fuel changes, along with the changes to Star Citizen with dynamic server meshing and Starchitect and the mission system and such. So that way we have more use for these large ships in order to move people and equipment around, in order to engage with that content, in order to relocate, to a new base, in order to do power projection type things in an area, that sort of gameplay. And the last thing that I want to talk about, all of this falls in line with what CR talked about for how quantum travel would work regarding small and large ships in the last post that he did on Spectrum back in 2019. And this is reiterating things and concepts that he had talked about way back in the beginning of Star Citizen's development. So all this is coming around full circle. So when people talk about the older information, and if it's old, it's no longer valid, that's patently false. If you look at the 1.0 roadmap, so much of the 1.0 roadmap can be linked back to things that are part of original concepts and ideas for how Star Citizen will work. Now, are they going to work out exactly as they talked about? If they gave details, no. But the large scale idea, the 30,000 foot view, is still there. When they go about bringing these things into the development limelight, the eye of development Sauron, as Jared says, they look at this old information, and this is the starting point, essentially the concept and the white box for how these things will work. And that's why so many of these things actually didn't get detailed descriptions of how they would work, exactly, because they learned eventually that, hey, that's not a good idea. But this is a really good idea, a really good reference in order to understand how quantum travel is designed to work, how quantum drives actually work in game right now. They're just limited by the fact that the star systems are small, and that the amount of fuel that we have is large, the consumption we have is low, and the gameplay requires this. But we are moving more towards what this is with the development of Star Citizen, with the development of the ships, the development of the content, the development of the star systems themselves, in order to warrant these sorts of things that CIG and Chris Roberts have always wanted to be a part of the game, as well as enabling professions in the game that are part of the 1.0 roadmap. So that's all I have for this Scanner Anomaly. I hope you guys have found this informative. I thought it was an interesting deep dive that I did on my own, and I thought you guys would appreciate some of this information. I know it's a lot of stuff to talk about. I encourage you to rewatch. I encourage you to, if you're watching this on YouTube later, drop your comments and questions or questions in the comments. I would even love it even more if you joined the Discord, and because there's a lot of people in my Discord that do much the same thing and engage in the conversations with me, and that help me with this stuff and have similar perspectives or different perspectives. And so the keeping the conversation going is good for everyone in order to have a better understanding of how things go, and have a healthier relationship with Star Citizen's development is the way I like to put it. Yeah, bring it. Well, and that's part of the thing is you won't have to with a fighter, and the content that you do with fighters. The idea is that you don't go from Hurston to Microtech on a regular basis. The idea is that you have so much content within, say the Hurston planetary system, its planets and moons, that you don't jump very far. That's part of the reason with the new flight model we have Quantum Travel Boost, is that you spend less time in quantum and more time playing the game. That's part of what that flight model is all about. So that way you're not having to, the quantum travel, quantum boost is so that way you can very quickly, boost out of the atmosphere and into space and not have to deal with nav mode. If you're flying around fighters and doing stuff, you're not meant to be going, across system from, from one planet to another in Pyro or in Nyx or anything like that. You're supposed to be staying around a planet and engaging the content around there within that planetary system for longer before then making the decision, to progress to another planet, or having content that then takes you over there in a progression fashion at an appropriate time, not just willy-nilly like it does right now. For example, in Nyx, you do the content in Nyx right now, and you do one mission and it takes you clear across the system, and then you do another mission, within the same sort of chain or within the same category, and it takes you clear across in the other direction, and then you do a third mission and it's clear across back in the other direction, and within 3 missions you've done 120 to 150 gigameters of quantum travel and spent so much time in quantum and gone through so much fuel. And that's not the intent, never has been. But if you are engaging in the content that does like hauling, or you're going from planet to planet for certain content, you progress to a larger ship and you make those jumps quicker because you have a higher top speed. That's what all this article is, this post from CR is about, is that the idea is that a fighter can accelerate faster to their top speed, but their top speed is much lower than a larger ship, and the larger ship can maintain that top speed for longer, A, because it has more fuel, and B, because it has more cooling ability. So you can very quickly jump around a planetary system in a fighter or a small ship. You can get from moon to station to planet, within that planetary system very quickly. You can do a whole lot of content very fast, much faster than you do it right now. And that you have a similar but different relationship to the entire system with larger ships. So that way you reach that that it takes you longer to reach that top speed, but you're able to achieve that top speed to cross those larger distances faster. You have more cooling ability, so that way you don't, because right now we don't even have the ability. The systems are small enough that when you are in quantum, you don't even hit your top speed. For like the Idris, you don't even hit the top speed. You're continuing to accelerate until you hit that halfway point in Nyx, and then you have to start decelerating. And so for those larger systems that we get to, like say Castra ends up actually being 22 AU like it's supposed to be, you would be able to accelerate for longer to then hit that top speed, to be at that top speed for longer. And because you have more cooling ability, you wouldn't run into that overheat part where as soon, where you then have to drop out of quantum and then cool before you resume your journey. And that's part of what all of this is designed to, is to allow you to have choice with the engineering system, which the systemic Python resource management system is what came before. So that way players have agency to move energy and cooling around in order to go faster, in order to quantum longer, or stay at their top speed longer, etc. To choose how they want to play when it comes to travel for getting around the Star Citizen universe. It's about having gameplay for people who want to be able to move around quickly and do a whole lot of content in their fighters, but also have gameplay for people who want to be on those longer journeys for explorers, or to go out into deep space to get at hard to get resources, or for those long hauling trips and so on. Room for all of that. If you have a Gladius, what you're supposed to be doing is dogfighting. That's the point of having a Gladius. If you want to do other things, you work your way up towards getting a more utilitarian ship or a different type of ship, that's in that small same profile. Yeah, a Gladius is a fighter. You do the missions that you use a fighter with a Gladius. If you have a starter miner ship. You go do starting mining missions, and then if you want to move up to larger ships, you can choose to do so. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. But if you have a collection of ships and then you say, okay, well, right now I'm based in Stanton and I want to, be based in Pyro. I'm going to make my way, I'm going to earn enough in order to move a Liberator so that way I can pack up my ships that I have as well as a whole bunch of supplies and other things I've acquired and then relocate all in one swoop. Well, yeah, you're not going to, you're not going to make a lot of money early on. You start making more money, later on in the game. It's just like any other game, but earning money is one of the progression elements. It's just one of them. And part of the thing is the game's fucking broken right now. We all know that. But the game is broken right now, and but the important thing is with missions involving dogfighting, the payout isn't huge, but you can do a lot of them very quickly. And that's what this is about, is being able to do more of them in a shorter period of time in the same area without spending so much on fuel. Just sounds like you're scratching by. New player to the game in a new small ship. I don't know what to tell you, bud. No one's supposed to be making big money right at the beginning, and the only way you can do that is if you exploit industry things, or if you get together with other people. People always play. Well, I like to play solo. It's like, all right, well, you're cutting yourself off. You're hamstringing yourself if you only play solo and you don't play with the group, because you can make a lot more money as a group than you can playing solo, unless you just absolutely want to just grind dogfighting. Yeah, still too much money in the game after a wipe. If you only have a Gladius, you can the ghillie missions. And if until you get comfortable, don't do the higher end ones, but just you do the ghillie missions and keep repeating them, because you make money. You make money and you have very little expenses, unless you have to repair a lot. Well, there you go. Yeah, if you're in an org, the more you group up, the more money you can make. You can do those higher paying contracts. You can get through contracts faster. If you end up going and doing some industry stuff with people, you can really pile it on, especially if you're hyper efficient. If you're like me and you're just doing it to play and have fun, you won't make as much money as fast. But the idea is that you are living in space and you're gonna have expenses and you're gonna have to make good decisions in order to get ahead. And if you're reckless, you're gonna end up wasting a whole lot of money on repairs and other fuel costs and stuff like that. But that's part of the learning curve of the game, and the game has too high of a learning curve right now because so little is tutorialized. But on top of that, there's an additional learning curve in learning what's broken and how to work around it. And that there's nothing any of us can do about that. That's in CIG's hands, and all we can do is commiserate together about it, like we do right here. That's one of the things Danger Hobo and I talk about the most, is like how broken shit is and how frustrating it is, but we still keep coming back. You don't have to have a big ship to make money, though. I know lots of people that dogfighting is their thing, and they have gotten good at dogfighting, and that's how they make their money. Dogfighting and doing bounties. A lot of the bounty missions are dogfighting type missions.
Part of the crew.
Hey, thank you so much for the follow. Really appreciate it.
Part of the ship. Part of the crew. Part of the ship. Part of the crew. Part of the ship.
Yeah. Broken isn't that bad. I mean, you live and learn. Shit happens. We were doing we're gonna come off of this part. We're gonna go to the other screen because we're gonna wrap it up here in a minute. So for Broken, Friday night, Wednesday night, High Prince Dragon and I and a few other people, we did the Breaker Station assassination missions, but basically we went there to get loot and to get Satyrix in order to upgrade to craft upgraded abrades for salvations for mining contracts to make more money. But I had a whole one SCU crate. I mean, it was getting quite full of loot that I could make a good amount of money on. And we did not only did we take the mission for the assassination there, we also did 2 rounds of the high point game something for killing the Valakars. We got paid out for that. So I think I ended up making like 150K in the evening, which is not much. People make way more than that, just grinding, other missions. But on top of the payouts from the missions, I also had a crap ton of loot that I could make a lot of money off of if I wanted to. So I probably made, 300K in 4 to 5 hours or so, and not being efficient about it at all. Probably make a rate of about 100K an hour. And if you're doing bounty missions, the ghillie missions and stuff, yeah, well, and Danger Robo says, you can make more money mining by making better mining lasers with the Satyrix. I just want to do salvage. But yeah, there's way more efficient ways to go about it. You just have to ask people. I'm in it to have fun. I'm not in it to get rich, because I've learned enough on how to avoid wasting money and dying and such, and getting blown up, and so that way that expense doesn't affect me as much. But Danger Hope, are you saying ghillie 6 and over are the higher paying ones, or the higher ones that you don't want to do solo? Yeah, Bringer, the lower level bounty missions don't pay much, but they take like 5 to 10 minutes to do. Even me, I'm not a good dogfighter, and I can grind bounties, and I can make anywhere from 100 to 200K an hour, no problem. Oh yeah, you can do up to ghillie 6 and a gladius easily. And that gets you, you get rep, you get blueprints and stuff. Yeah, refueling is going to get nerfed. Every patch has a thing that is like the best money maker, but if you chase that, you're just going to end up buying ships for no reason. It's better to find a game loop that you enjoy and find people that enjoy doing it as well, and go do it with those people. You'll have more fun, you'll make more money, you'll learn the game faster, and then once you get good at that, once you get good at that and comfortable with it, then you'll branch out into other things and try other things. Oh gosh, I was going to say something. I don't remember what it was. Oh, yeah. And I said it earlier in the podcast, but I had a 1 SCU full of stuff. Probably half of it I was going to sell and make money on. The rest of it I was going to collect or use to stockpile on my Idris. And I had the crate in my Asgard, and we were in Quantum, and I moved the crate just to reorganize things, and it disappeared. The whole crate. Gone. Including like 6 Satyrix gems. I think I had 2 that were 700 something, 2 that were 971, and the other 2 were just throwaways. But I was like, motherfucker, all that work gone, a whole play session of loot gone. I got the payouts for the missions, but I lost that whole play session of loot. Well, and that's the thing, Ashhole, like, never move, and I usually don't do that, but I've been having no issues with doing that. I've been moving shit around in my Idris like crazy for like the last 2 patches. No issues with moving shit around the Idris, but I go back to playing with the Asgard, and I hadn't used that in a while, and poof, my crate's gone. And I don't think, I can't remember when I had a box disappear out of my ship in QT. Like, I know it happens to people, but like, yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and we were only, the other thing is, and I play more like I'm RPing a character. Like, I don't voice act the character and everything like that. But when I take the mission, I take the mission because I'm going to do the mission. I'm not out there. I have never been a player that just grinds. I can't stop. I can't stand the grind. Oh yeah, people thought I've fallen out of the ship during QT. I can't remember the last time I lost an item, particularly a box in QT. I've had things go missing, but not from me moving them, just from, I get out of my seat and I come back like, where the fuck? Huh, weird. And whether that's QT or what, I don't know. But literally, I didn't even move it yet. I just clicked on it with the tractor beam, and then and poof, it was gone. Right in front of my face. I was like, fuck. Oh man. But you know what, it is what it is. Like, I can always get more. I stream and play usually 2, if not 3 nights a week for 3 to 5 hours, and again, all this is temporary. It's all going to get wiped at 1.0. What else? Yeah. Nope, I learned that lesson. I'm not going to do it again. If I'm tempted to do it again, I'm going to be like, no, Ashhole's going to make fun of me and call me stupid. But yeah. So yeah, it's time to wrap it up for the evening. Been going on for, oh gosh, how long have we been chatting? Where's my, going on 4 hours now. Yes. Hold me to it, Ashhole. Hold me to it. Be an Ashhole. That's the only way I learn. Danger Hobo knows. But yeah, so tomorrow I'm gonna write out, probably finish writing out the history thing, in order to give the context for the org. If you're interested in checking that out, hop in the Discord. I'd love to tell you more about it. Would love for you to join us. The other thing is the org is very casual. You, in order to join the play sessions, you don't even have to join the org on the RSI webpage. You just have to, hop in my Discord and get the role in the Discord so you can see the events and be in the chat. I don't even require you to be in the org on the webpage. It's just a very casual thing. But that's why I put out all the information for it. I think so. My plan right now is to do the write up tomorrow afternoon and post that so I can be more finished with the page, and then start working on getting B-roll for the video for it that I want to make. But then I think I'm going to start doing 0 to hero streams as well, or 0 to anti-hero, in order to tie that story into the org story and the story for my main. And so I think I'm going to start that on Monday. That's the plan, Monday evening. And tentatively, I think I'm going to do Monday nights will be 0 to hero. And Wednesday and Friday nights will be org events or just playing on my main, depending on how many people I can get. And the main will be sort of RPing as if I am the first Quero, the leader of the org. Ideally, probably at least Fridays for org events, but if I can get people to join me on Wednesday nights, great. If not, I'll play solo and I'll go do the same thing, but in a sort of RP sort of manner. Hey, Riggsy, I really appreciate it. Thanks for the feedback. And again, I always appreciate the feedback. If I'm not acknowledging my own strengths and limitations in an academic fashion, I want you guys to hold me to it. If you guys, and again, this is a open development, but the podcast is an open development process as well. If there's something you want me to do a deep dive into, hop in the Discord, let me know. We have a channel for it. It hardly gets used. If there's something that I presented and you have questions on, or you have additional information that I missed, again, let me know in the comments. Bring it to the Discord. I want to see it. I want to hear from you guys. This is part of the process. I shouldn't be, I engage in other content creators and people in my Discord on this stuff, but the more people, the more eyes and ears and minds we have on sharing this information and having a better understanding of it, the better for everybody, especially me, because it's all about me. No, it's not. But yeah, Let's go ahead. We've got, let's see, Restream says 23 people. So how many on Twitch and how many on YouTube? Got 16 viewers on Twitch right now and another 7 on YouTube. So let's go ahead and find someone to raid on Twitch. And again, YouTube folks, I really appreciate you guys. Those who are watching now and those who are watching the VOD later. And again, if you just want to watch individual segments, I do download this and upload the individual segments, the Roadmap Roundup, the Scanner Anomaly on the how the Odin informs the Valhalla, and the Spectrum Pulse on Squadron 42 delay. All that will be separate videos on my YouTube as well for you guys to rewatch and share later. So let's go ahead and find someone to raid. I always try to find someone that isn't too huge, preferably someone that I follow, because the people that I follow are people that have raided me as well. Let's see. Category. Oh, weird. And if you guys have any suggestions of who we should raid, I'm always open to suggestions as well. They took away the thing for filtering by people that you follow. And I also try to raid people who keep it chill. No, you know, if you agree to the rules on my Discord, then those are the kind of people that I try and raid. Who's raided me? Oh, Super Penguin TV is he's doing a giveaway. Playing Star Citizen has 116 viewers, but they have raided me before, so let's raid them. Back. All right, let's go ahead and start the raid. Again, YouTube, thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. And I will let you guys know if we're going to do the next episode next Saturday or the following Saturday once we find out when the Roadmap Roundup and Monthly Report are coming out. Alrighty, looks like everybody's ready. Rating now.